Beneath the streets of the city, people were still breathing long after the Nazis believed them dead. While soldiers marched above ground, while orders were shouted and gunshots echoed through courtyards, an entire hidden world existed below, dark, silent, and packed with families who had learned how to disappear without leaving a trace. This was not just a ghetto sealed by walls and barbed wire. It was a city turned inside out, where survival meant digging into the earth, holding your breath as boots passed overhead, and trusting that the ground itself would protect you. In Minsk, Jews didn't only hide in attics or behind doors. They carved out an underground city beneath Nazi control. Some lived there for days, some for months, some for more than a year without seeing daylight. And when the Germans came to erase the ghetto from existence, they discovered something they never expected. The city was still alive underneath them. Chapter 1. Minsk before the catastrophe. The sound comes first. Not gunfire, not shouting, but footsteps. Heavy boots, striking stone in perfect rhythm, echoing down a wide boulevard that only days earlier smelled of bread, ink, and coal smoke. A tram bell rings somewhere in the distance, sharp and ordinary, the kind of sound people barely notice until it disappears forever. In that moment, Minsk still looks alive. Shops are open. Windows are unbroken. Children still run across courtyards. But the city is already holding its breath, even if it does not yet know why. Before the catastrophe, Minsk was a city built on layers, languages, loyalties, and memories stacked atop one another like sediment. It sat at a crossroads of empires that had risen and fallen, absorbed and erased, and by the 1930s, it had become a Soviet capital city with the posture of modernity and the soul of something much older. Smoke from factories drifted over narrow streets where wooden houses leaned into one another. Broad avenues carried banners and slogans about progress, industry, and the future. Yet in the side streets, life moved to a quieter rhythm, guided by habit rather than ideology. Jews had lived in Minsk for centuries, long before the word Soviet existed. By the eve of the Second World War, nearly 1/3 of the city's population was Jewish, making it one of the largest Jewish communities in Eastern Europe. They were tailors, teachers, doctors, factory workers, writers, engineers. Some lived in cramped apartments, shared with extended family. Others occupied newer concrete blocks, rising across the city. Poverty existed, but so did ambition. Minsk was not a place frozen in time. It was a city trying to move forward. Under Soviet rule, Jewish life changed in ways that felt both liberating and suffocating. The old religious structures that had once governed daily life were systematically dismantled. Synagogues were closed or repurposed. Rabbis disappeared from public view. Religious instruction was banned, not only for Jews, but for everyone. Faith itself was treated as an enemy of the state, something backward, dangerous, and incompatible with the promised future. Yet Jewish identity did not vanish. It adapted. Instead of prayer halls, there were workers' clubs. Instead of religious schools, there were state-run classrooms where children learned mathematics, literature, and ideology side by side. Yiddish, stripped of its religious context, was elevated as a cultural language. It was taught in schools, printed in newspapers, spoken on stage in theaters funded by the state. To many Jewish families, this felt like a compromise. Lose the old faith, but keep the words, the stories, the cadence of home. On stage, actors performed Yiddish plays that explored family conflict, poverty, revolution, and identity. In the audience, people laughed, cried, and whispered to one another, careful but engaged. The language sounded familiar, comforting, even as the world around it changed. For a time, it felt like survival through adaptation. The past was trimmed away, but the core remained. At least that is what many believed. In the markets, Jewish vendors argued over prices with Belarusian farmers, their voices rising and falling in practiced rhythm. The smell of pickled vegetables mixed with fresh bread and engine oil. Factory whistles marked the hours of the day, loud and unavoidable, cutting through conversations mid-sentence. Life was regulated, controlled, watched, but it was still life. People married. Children were born. Arguments erupted over politics, food shortages, and cramped living space. Minsk did not feel like a city waiting to die. It felt like a city enduring. Yet fear was never entirely absent. It lived quietly, lodged in the back of conversations, hidden behind lowered voices and careful glances. The purges of the late 1930s had taught everyone the cost of standing out. Neighbors disappeared overnight. Apartments were sealed. Names stopped being spoken aloud. Jewish families were not singled out as Jews during these years, but they were not spared either. Being Soviet meant being vulnerable. Everyone knew it. Still, there was a fragile sense of safety in numbers, in routine, in the belief that catastrophe belonged to history, not the present. News from Europe arrived filtered through state censorship, but rumors slipped through. People heard about Germany, about new laws, about Jews being pushed out of public life. But Minsk felt far away from Berlin, and the Soviet Union insisted it was strong, prepared, untouchable. Many believed it. Others wanted to. On summer evenings, the city softened. Windows were open to let in air heavy with dust and the smell of trees from nearby parks. Radios played music and speeches in equal measure. Families gathered after long shifts at factories or offices, sharing thin soup and darker jokes. Children practiced songs for school performances, unaware that within months, schools would be empty, buildings burned, voices silenced. There were warning signs, but they did not arrive all at once. They came as whispers, as changes in tone, as military trains moving westward, loaded with equipment and men who looked tired before the fighting even began. Some people sensed that something was wrong, deeply wrong, but sensing danger is not the same as understanding it. The human mind resists imagining the unimaginable. In the early hours of late June, the sky over Minsk changed. The sound was not thunder. It was sharper, mechanical, relentless. Explosions tore through the outskirts of the city as German aircraft struck without warning. Buildings shook. Windows shattered inward, spraying glass across floors where people had been sleeping minutes earlier. Smoke rose in thick columns, blotting out familiar landmarks. The war that had seemed distant was suddenly inside the city itself. Panic moved faster than information. Streets filled with people running in no clear direction, clutching bags, children, anything they could carry. Sirens wailed, then fell silent, then wailed again. Fires burned unchecked as emergency services collapsed under the speed of the assault. The Red Army retreated in chaos. Orders contradicted one another. Defense lines evaporated. For Jewish families, the shock carried an added weight. Stories they had heard, half believed, half dismissed, now pressed in on them with terrifying clarity. Germany was not just another enemy state. It was something else entirely. But even then, few could grasp what that meant. Not yet. Within days, German forces entered Minsk. Tanks rolled down avenues that had once hosted parades and slogans about peace and progress. Soldiers moved with discipline and purpose, their presence cold and efficient. Some residents watched from behind curtains. Others stood openly, stunned, trying to read the faces of the men who now controlled their city. At first, the violence seemed selective. Arrests, searches, executions framed as reprisals. Jews were ordered to identify themselves, to wear markings, to register. These were presented as administrative measures, temporary necessities. The language of control arrived before the language of extermination. It always does. The city that had once felt layered and alive began to flatten under fear. Jewish institutions closed overnight. Yiddish theaters went dark. Schools shut their doors. Familiar streets became dangerous simply by existing within them. People stopped greeting one another openly. Trust thinned. Silence grew heavier. Minsk had not yet become a ghetto. It had not yet become a graveyard. But the rupture had occurred. The ordinary sounds of life, the tram bell, the factory whistle, the laughter drifting from open windows, were being replaced by something harder, sharper, and far more final. And beneath the city's surface, in the minds of those who understood what Germany brought with it, a question began to form, unspoken but impossible to ignore. How do you survive when the ground beneath you is no longer solid? The answer had not yet revealed itself. But soon, in the shadows and under the streets of Minsk, people would begin to dig. Chapter 2. Operation Barbarossa reaches Minsk. The invasion does not arrive like a distant rumor or a slow-moving front line. It arrives as noise and flame, tearing through sleep and certainty at the same moment. One night, Minsk is still a city of factories, schools, and crowded apartments. The next morning, it is a battlefield without trenches, a target without warning. The sky itself becomes hostile, vibrating with the metallic roar of aircraft that blot out the sun before anyone has time to understand what they are seeing. When the first bombs fall, they do not discriminate. Railway yards erupt in fire. Warehouses split open like broken ribs. Residential streets collapse inward, burying kitchens, beds, and lives under bricks and smoke. People run barefoot through glass-strewn corridors, clutching children wrapped in blankets, eyes wide with disbelief. The smell of burning fuel mixes with dust and wet plaster, coating the throat with every breath. Minsk is not being fought over. It is being shattered. Germany calls it Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history. To the men in Berlin, Minsk is a strategic objective, a node on a map to be seized and passed through. To the people inside the city, it feels like the end of gravity itself, as if the rules governing the world have abruptly stopped working. The Red Army, caught off guard and overwhelmed, attempts to organize resistance, but the speed of the assault leaves little room for coordination. Orders arrive too late or contradict one another. Units retreat, regroup, then vanish. Within days, the city is encircled. German artillery pounds defensive positions until there is nothing left to defend. The air smells constantly of smoke, oil, and scorched earth. At night, fires burn unchecked, turning the skyline into a low, flickering horizon of orange and black. People shelter in basements and stairwells, counting seconds between explosions, trying to convince themselves that if they stay quiet enough, invisible enough, they might survive what is happening above them. 4 Jewish residents. Fear sharpens into something more precise. The name Germany carries weight, history, and dread. Even before the war, fragments of information had leaked through, stories of exclusion, beatings, synagogues burned, businesses destroyed. Now those fragments collide with reality. This is not simply another occupying army. This is an ideology in uniform. German troops enter Minsk with clinical efficiency. Their boots strike the pavement in rigid formation, echoing through streets that have gone unnaturally silent. Tanks idle at intersections. Machine guns are positioned at key crossings. Flags bearing the swastika are raised over administrative buildings before the smoke has fully cleared. The city is captured not just militarily, but psychologically. Minsk has been taken whole. Almost immediately, a second force follows behind the front lines. They do not wear the same insignia as the regular army, but their purpose is far clearer. The Einsatzgruppen arrive with lists, orders, and an understanding of their task that leaves no room for ambiguity. They are not here to occupy. They are here to eliminate. The first arrests begin quietly. Jewish men are pulled from apartments, workshops, and streets under the pretext of questioning or labor registration. Some are taken to courtyards, others to nearby forests or ravines. Shots are heard, then silence. Families wait for fathers and sons who never return. At first, many believe these are isolated incidents, acts of wartime brutality that will pass. But the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. German proclamations are posted on walls and lampposts, written in sharp, bureaucratic language. Jews are ordered to register. Jews are ordered to report for labor. Jews are ordered to identify themselves. Each command arrives framed as temporary, necessary, orderly. Each one tightens the noose. The city itself begins to change shape. Streets, once busy with conversation, and trade become corridors of fear. People move quickly, eyes down, avoiding attention. Neighbors stop knocking on one another's doors. Trust becomes dangerous. Rumors spread faster than facts. Mass shootings outside the city. Entire villages wiped out. Men forced to dig their own graves. Some rumors are exaggerated. Others are not exaggerated enough. In the chaos of occupation, the Germans exploit existing infrastructure. Soviet records, housing registries, employment lists, all are seized and repurposed. Names become targets. Addresses become destinations. Bureaucracy, once tedious and impersonal, becomes lethal. The machinery of modern administration slides seamlessly into the machinery of murder. Public executions begin as spectacles meant to teach. Bodies are left hanging for days. Signs attached warning of punishment for resistance, sabotage, or disobedience. The smell of death lingers in the summer air, unavoidable, unmistakable. Children are told not to look. Adults pretend not to see, but everyone sees. The Jewish population of Minsk is now trapped between disbelief and dawning clarity. Leaving the city is nearly impossible. Roads are controlled. Railways are destroyed or guarded. Those who attempt to flee risk being shot as spies or deserters. Families debate in whispers, stay or run, hide or comply. Every choice carries the weight of irreversible consequence. German soldiers move into Jewish apartments, seizing furniture, clothing, radios, anything of value. What cannot be carried is smashed. What cannot be used is burned. Possession itself becomes a crime. People begin sleeping fully dressed, documents hidden close to the body, ready to move at a moment's notice, though there is nowhere safe to go. The occupiers are not all the same. Some soldiers are indifferent, focused on orders and routine. Others are openly cruel, enjoying the power to humiliate and terrorize. A word spoken in the wrong tone, a glance held too long, a failure to step aside quickly enough, any of it can provoke violence. Arbitrary terror becomes policy. Unpredictability, its most effective weapon. As days turn into weeks, the scale of killing increases. Mass shootings are carried out on the outskirts of Minsk, far enough from the city center to avoid immediate visibility, close enough that the echoes still carry. Victims are transported in trucks, told they are being resettled or put to work. At the sites, they are forced to undress. Belongings are piled neatly. Shots follow in rapid succession. The earth absorbs what the city cannot bear to witness. Word filters back through survivors, through whispers, through the absence of those who never return. Fear transforms into certainty. The Germans are not punishing individuals. They are targeting a people. By late summer, the occupying authorities begin to formalize control. Jewish leaders are summoned and ordered to assemble lists, to convey instructions, to ensure compliance. Refusal means death, not just for the individual, but for families and neighbors. Cooperation becomes a coerced act of survival, a trap with no exit. The illusion of Soviet protection evaporates completely. The state that had once promised security, order, and unity is gone, replaced by a regime that defines entire populations as disposable. For Jews in Minsk, identity itself becomes a sentence. Children sense the change, even if they cannot articulate it. Play disappears from courtyards. Games fall silent. Questions multiply. Why can't we go outside? Why are soldiers everywhere? Why is father gone? Answers are improvised, half-truths offered in the hope of preserving innocence a little longer. But innocence is no longer safe. The city's soundscape shifts. Laughter fades. Music stops. In its place come commands barked in German, boots striking pavement, engines idling late into the night. Even silence becomes threatening, broken suddenly by screams or gunfire that rip through the dark without warning. Some attempt resistance in small ways, hiding documents, sharing food, sabotaging equipment. These acts are tiny, almost invisible, but they matter. Each one is a refusal to fully surrender humanity. Yet for every act of defiance, The response is swift and brutal. Hostages are taken. Entire buildings are punished. Terror is collective by design. As autumn approaches, the Germans move toward consolidation. Killing alone is not enough. Control must be systematized. The idea begins to circulate among the occupation authorities of concentrating Jews into a single, contained area. Easier to guard, easier to exploit, easier to eliminate when the time comes. The concept is not new. It has been tested elsewhere. Minsk is next. People hear the word ghetto for the first time not as history, but as a future. No official announcement has been made yet, but the signs are everywhere. Restricted movement. Curfews. Designated zones. Each restriction shrinks the city, compressing lives into tighter and tighter spaces. For now, Minsk still exists as a whole, wounded but recognizable. Streets still connect. Buildings still stand. But something fundamental has shifted beneath the surface. The invasion has not only brought war, it has introduced a new logic, one in which extermination is planned, organized, and executed with chilling efficiency. As winter edges closer and the days shorten, Jewish families in Minsk feel the walls closing in, even before they are built. They do not yet know where those walls will stand, how high they will rise, or how many will be trapped inside them. But they know this much with terrifying clarity. The city they knew is gone, and what comes next will not simply confine them above ground. It will force them to disappear. Chapter 3. The ghetto is sealed. The order does not arrive with drama. There are no sirens, no explosions, no sudden rush of troops flooding the streets. Instead, it comes quietly, printed on coarse paper and nailed to walls already scarred by bullet marks and soot. People stop to read in silence, lips moving as they absorb each line. Jews are to relocate. Jews are to move into a designated district. Jews are to bring only what they can carry. The deadline is short. The consequences for disobedience are not spelled out because they no longer need to be. At first, some refuse to believe it is real. They have already lost so much. Homes damaged by bombing, family members arrested or killed, jobs erased overnight. Surely this is another temporary measure, another bureaucratic maneuver meant to control and intimidate. But the soldiers stationed at intersections, the lists being checked, the rifles held casually at chest height, all tell a different story. This time, the order is final. The designated area lies in the poorest, most crowded section of Minsk, a tangle of narrow streets and aging buildings never meant to hold tens of thousands of people. Wooden houses lean toward one another as if exhausted. Courtyards are small, uneven, filled with debris and broken furniture left behind by those who fled earlier violence. This will be the ghetto. This will be where Jewish life is compressed, monitored, and ultimately destroyed. The move begins almost immediately. Families pack in frantic silence, hands shaking as they decide what is worth carrying when everything else must be abandoned. A pot, a blanket, documents wrapped in cloth, photographs tucked into pockets. Children clutch toys they will soon lose. Elderly parents sit on beds stripped of linens, staring at walls they may never see again. The air inside apartments smells of dust and panic, of sweat and extinguished hope. Outside, the streets fill with people moving in the same direction, a slow, uneven river of bodies flowing toward confinement. Some push carts piled high with bedding and cookware. Others carry nothing at all, having already been stripped by soldiers or looters. German guards shout instructions, striking those who move too slowly or look back too long. The sound of crying blends with the scrape of wheels on stone, the dull thud of boots keeping time. Neighbors watch from windows as Jewish families pass below. Some faces are blank, others filled with fear, pity, or relief that it is not happening to them. A few avert their eyes entirely. The occupation has already taught everyone that witnessing suffering can be dangerous. Silence becomes a form of self-preservation. When families reach the ghetto boundary, there is no ceremony, no gate yet, no wall fully built. Just soldiers, ropes, makeshift barriers, and men with clipboards checking names. People are herded into buildings already overflowing with new arrivals. Apartments meant for one family are assigned to 3, 4, sometimes 5. Privacy disappears in hours. Space becomes a memory. Inside the ghetto, the noise never stops. Voices echo through stairwells at all hours. Babies cry through the night. People argue over corners of rooms, over floor space, over access to windows that offer a sliver of light and air. The smell is overwhelming. Unwashed bodies, damp clothing, human waste, smoke from makeshift stoves burning whatever can be found. Disease begins to spread almost immediately. Food is scarce from the start. Rations are announced, then reduced again. Bread becomes the central obsession, measured, divided, fought over. People chew slowly, trying to make each bite last longer than it possibly can. Hunger settles into the body like a second skeleton, reshaping faces, hollowing eyes, bending backs. Children learn new rules faster than adults. Do not wander. Do not speak loudly. Do not approach soldiers. Do not cry in public if you can help it. Play disappears, replaced by waiting. Waiting for food. Waiting for news. Waiting for fathers who are taken for labor and may or may not return. The ghetto is not sealed all at once. At first, gaps remain. Some Jews slip out to trade possessions for food, bribing guards, or sneaking through poorly monitored areas. These early weeks create the illusion that survival might still be possible through ingenuity, through movement, through bending the rules. But the Germans are watching, learning, adjusting. Barbed wire appears next, strung hastily between posts, across streets, around courtyards. Wooden fences rise where walls do not yet exist. Guard towers follow, their silhouettes cutting into the sky. Machine guns are mounted, angled inward. The message is unmistakable. This is no temporary relocation. This is a prison. Within the ghetto, a forced administrative structure is imposed. Jewish leaders are summoned and ordered to form a council responsible for maintaining order, distributing food, organizing labor. Refusal is not an option. Compliance does not guarantee safety. Every decision becomes a moral trap. Every action carrying the potential to save some lives while endangering others. Authority inside the ghetto is hollow, enforced under threat of death. Labor becomes mandatory. Men and women are marched out daily under guard to work in factories, warehouses, repair crews. They leave before dawn and return after dark, if they return at all. Those who collapse from exhaustion are beaten or shot. The work is brutal, the rations inadequate, the purpose clear. The ghetto is not meant to sustain life. It is meant to extract usefulness before disposal. Fear becomes ambient like the cold. People stop reacting to gunshots, to screams, to the sight of bodies lying in the street. Shock hardens into numbness. Survival requires emotional withdrawal, a narrowing of focus to the next hour, the next task, the next breath. Thinking too far ahead is dangerous. Hope becomes risky. Rumors circulate constantly. Some say the ghetto will be temporary. Others say deportations are coming. Some insist that laborers will be spared, that obedience will protect families. Others whisper about mass shootings in forests nearby, about entire groups taken away and never heard from again. No rumor can be confirmed. All of them feel plausible. The Germans reinforce uncertainty deliberately. Announcements contradict each other. Rules change without warning. One day, a permit allows movement. The next, it is invalid. Curfews shift. Punishments escalate. People learn that predictability is gone. Any sense of control is an illusion. Winter approaches quickly. Cold seeps into poorly heated rooms, settling into bones already weakened by hunger. People burn furniture, books, even pieces of their homes to stay warm. Smoke fills rooms with no ventilation, making eyes sting and lungs ache. The cold does not kill quickly. It kills slowly, stripping strength, will, and resistance. Children grow thinner by the day. Their clothes hang loosely, sleeves too long, collars too wide. Some stop speaking altogether. Others grow loud and reckless, unable to contain fear. Parents ration food with trembling hands, sometimes pretending they have already eaten. Guilt becomes constant, crushing. Despite everything, life does not completely vanish. Weddings occur quietly, without celebration. Songs are whispered at night. Stories are told to children in the dark, voices low, words chosen carefully to avoid frightening them further. These moments are fragile, fleeting, but they matter. They assert humanity in a place designed to erase it. As the ghetto becomes fully sealed, escape grows nearly impossible. Those caught outside without authorization are executed publicly. Bodies are left as warnings. The barbed wire tightens, both physically and psychologically. The outside world begins to feel unreal, like a dream fading upon waking. The population density reaches unbearable levels. Disease spreads unchecked. Typhus, dysentery, tuberculosis move through buildings with terrifying speed. Medical supplies are non-existent. Doctors improvise with rags, boiled water, hope. Many continue working even after they are sick themselves, refusing to abandon patients who have nowhere else to turn. German patrols move through the ghetto regularly, inspecting, counting, intimidating. Sometimes they arrive without explanation and take people at random. Other times, they arrive with lists. Names are called. Those selected are told they are being relocated or reassigned. People cling to loved ones until rifle butts tear them apart. Every departure feels final, because it usually is. The ghetto is now a closed system of suffering, engineered to degrade, isolate, and destroy. It exists not as a place of living, but as a waiting room for death. Yet even here, something unexpected begins to stir. People observe patterns. They memorize guard routines. They notice which walls are thinner, which cellars are deeper, which spaces are ignored. The ground beneath the ghetto is old, layered with basements, storage rooms, forgotten tunnels. At first, these spaces are used simply to hide, during raids, during searches, during moments when visibility itself becomes dangerous. But as the weeks pass and terror intensifies, a different idea begins to take shape, whispered late at night, shared only with the most trusted. If the city above has become a trap, perhaps survival lies below. No one knows yet how deep they will need to dig, how long they will need to hide, or how much darkness the human body can endure. They only know that the ghetto is sealed, the exits are gone, and waiting passively is no longer an option. Something is coming, and when it does, the people of Minsk will have to vanish, without leaving the city at all. Chapter 4. The Judenrat and Impossible Choices. It begins with a summons delivered under the barrel of a rifle. Names are called not in anger, but with administrative calm, as if this were an ordinary civic duty rather than the opening move in a moral trap. Jewish community leaders, professionals, men known for their education or organizational ability, are ordered to present themselves to German authorities. Refusal is not discussed. Everyone understands what refusal means now. Death, immediate and exemplary. They are taken to offices that still smell faintly of ink and paper, spaces once used for municipal planning and housing permits, now repurposed for domination. German officers sit behind desks, boots polished, expressions detached. The instructions are delivered plainly. A Jewish council will be formed. It will be responsible for maintaining order within the ghetto, distributing food, organizing labor, transmitting German directives, and ensuring compliance. The council will answer directly to the occupation authorities. Any failure will be punished collectively. This is the birth of the Judenrat in Minsk, though no one present believes it will truly govern anything. Authority without power is not authority at all. It is liability. The men selected understand this immediately, even if they do not yet grasp the full scale of what they are being asked to do. They are being positioned between their own people and a regime that has already demonstrated its willingness to kill without hesitation. When they return to the ghetto, the weight of the task settles visibly on their bodies. Shoulders slump, voices lower, eyes avoid meeting those of neighbors who look at them with a mixture of hope, suspicion, and fear. The council members are not celebrated. They are not trusted. They are endured. Everyone knows that proximity to power is dangerous, but so is the absence of any structure at all. The first meetings take place in overcrowded rooms where the air is thick with sweat and anxiety. There are no manuals for this kind of leadership, no precedents that offer solutions instead of warnings. Every decision feels like a gamble with human lives as currency. How to distribute food that is already insufficient. How to assign labor quotas without sending the weakest to their deaths. How to comply just enough to prevent reprisals without becoming an extension of the machinery that is killing them. German orders arrive daily, sometimes hourly. Lists must be produced. Numbers must be met. Workers must be delivered at dawn. Failure to comply will result in executions, not of the council members alone, but of hostages chosen at random. The threat is never abstract. It is enforced swiftly, brutally, and publicly. The Germans make certain that consequences are visible. The Judenrat attempts to introduce systems, registration cards, housing assignments, ration distribution schedules, but chaos resists organization. People are starving, sick, traumatized. Arguments break out over crumbs of bread, over space on a floor, over who receives medical attention first. Council members are shouted at, cursed, sometimes attacked. They absorb the rage because there is nowhere else for it to go. Food distribution becomes the most agonizing responsibility. Rations are calculated not by need, but by availability, which is to say, by German generosity that does not exist. Bread allotments shrink without explanation. Soup kitchens serve liquid so thin it barely clings to the spoon. Council members watch children lick bowls clean and ask for more that cannot be given. Every face becomes a mirror of accusation, whether spoken or silent. Labor lists are worse. The Germans demand workers for factories, warehouses, construction projects. Strong bodies are preferred, but laborers are often worked until they collapse, then replaced. The Judenrat debates endlessly, send the young and risk losing them, or send the old and condemn them outright. Every name written down feels like a death sentence, even when survival remains technically possible. Parents plead with council members to spare their sons. Wives beg for husbands to be kept home. Bribes appear, rings, watches, pieces of bread, anything of value offered in desperation. Some council members refuse outright, clinging to a fragile sense of fairness. Others accept, telling themselves that saving one life, any life, is better than saving none. Each choice corrodes them further. German inspections of the ghetto grow more frequent. Officers arrive unannounced, demanding reports, berating council members for inefficiency, threatening collective punishment. They enjoy forcing Jewish leaders to discipline their own people, turning authority inward like a blade. When beatings occur inside the ghetto, they are often carried out under German orders, but by Jewish police units established under the council's supervision. The line between survival and complicity blurs until it is almost impossible to see. The Jewish police are despised almost universally. They wear armbands, carry sticks, enforce curfews and orders that everyone knows come from German mouths. Some join believing they can protect their families. Others seek extra rations. A few are genuinely cruel. Most are simply trapped, just like everyone else. But their role makes them symbols of betrayal. Violence between Jews becomes another wound layered atop the original crime. Council members are summoned to witness executions meant to correct failures. Sometimes they are forced to select hostages themselves. The psychological damage is immense. Men who once debated literature and politics now argue over which 10 people will die to prevent 50 from being shot. Sleep becomes impossible. Guilt becomes physical, pressing down on the chest like a weight. Outside the council chambers, rumors flourish. Some accuse the Judenrat of collaboration. Others cling to the belief that the council can negotiate. That reason might still have power. Both perspectives misunderstand the reality. The Germans do not negotiate. They issue instructions. The council exists not to protect Jewish life, but to make its destruction more efficient. And yet, without the council, the violence would likely be even more indiscriminate. Council members understand this too. They cling to marginal gains, delaying an action by a day, hiding a name, miscounting a list. These small acts feel heroic and shameful at the same time. They save lives in the short term, while reinforcing a system designed to annihilate them all. The pressure fractures people from the inside. Some council members break down completely, unable to continue. Others become numb, functioning on routine alone. A few cling to a belief that order itself is a form of resistance, that preserving structure preserves humanity. Whether this is true or not hardly matters anymore. The machine keeps moving. As weeks pass, the Germans escalate demands. Larger labor quotas, faster compliance, stricter enforcement. Punishments for infractions grow more severe. Public hangings become more frequent. The Judenrat is blamed for failures it cannot prevent. Council members are beaten, humiliated, sometimes executed to remind the others of their replaceability. Inside the ghetto, perception hardens. Many residents stop seeing the council as intermediaries and begin seeing them as collaborators, regardless of intent. Trust erodes further. People stop sharing information. Secrecy becomes survival. Even the council begins to lose sight of what is happening beyond their narrow scope of responsibility. Children grow up watching adults make choices that feel incomprehensible. Why was that man taken and not another? Why does one family receive an extra loaf while another starves? There are no good explanations, only partial truths and silences. Moral clarity dissolves in the acid of necessity. At night, council members sit alone, heads in their hands, listening to the distant sounds of gunfire beyond the ghetto walls. They wonder if every decision they made was wrong, or if wrong has simply become the only option available. Some write notes, letters never sent, confessions no one will read. Others stop thinking altogether, afraid that reflection itself will destroy them. The Germans continue refining their system. The Judenrat proves useful. It organizes people, concentrates populations, distributes scarcity. It reduces the need for constant German presence inside the ghetto. Control becomes internalized. Violence becomes normalized. The occupiers step back, observing, intervening only when necessary. This is the true horror of the Judenrat. Not that it exists, but that it works, even partially. It allows the illusion of agency to persist just long enough to keep the machinery running. It turns survival into administration. It forces victims to participate in their own containment. But cracks begin to appear. Council members notice patterns. People taken for labor who never return. Entire groups disappearing after being relocated. Reports from outside the ghetto confirm what many already suspect. This is not exploitation alone. This is extermination in stages. Some council members begin quietly assisting resistance efforts, delaying lists, falsifying records, warning people of impending actions. These acts are dangerous beyond measure. Discovery means torture and death, not just for the individual, but for anyone connected to them. Still, the line between survival and resistance begins to shift. The Judenrat is no longer simply a tool of German control. It becomes a contested space, a battleground of intention and outcome. Every action carries dual meanings. Compliance can buy time. Defiance can inspire hope. Both can lead to death. As the ghetto settles into its grim routine, the council's role grows heavier, darker. They are trapped in a position designed to destroy them morally before it destroys them physically. They are asked to choose who eats, who works, who lives another day. These are not choices humans are meant to make. And yet, beneath the weight of impossible decisions, something else begins to emerge. A realization that obedience will not save them. That structure alone cannot protect against annihilation. That the Germans are not waiting for mistakes. They are waiting for the moment when the ghetto is no longer useful. The Judenrat can delay. It can soften blows. It can sometimes save individuals. But it cannot stop what is coming. And as the council members look out over a population growing thinner, quieter, more desperate by the day, a terrifying question begins to take shape, unspoken but unavoidable. If administration will not save them, and obedience will not spare them, then what will? The answer will not come from offices or lists or stamp papers. It will come from places the Germans are not looking, not above ground, but below it. Chapter 5: Hunger, Disease, and the Slow Death of the Body. Hunger does not arrive suddenly. It does not announce itself with violence or noise. It creeps in quietly, almost politely, settling into the body day by day until it becomes impossible to remember what it felt like not to be hungry. In the Minsk Ghetto, hunger is the first true ruler. It governs every thought, every movement, every decision. It reshapes time itself, turning days into endless stretches between meals that barely exist. At first, people still believe in rationing. They stand in lines clutching tin bowls, hoping the numbers written on scraps of paper still mean something. Bread distributions are announced, then delayed, then reduced. When bread finally appears, it is dark, dense, cut with sawdust or ground husks. A single slice is meant to last an entire day. Many eat it immediately, unable to resist. Others force themselves to break it into smaller pieces, rationing hunger the way one rations pain. The body reacts quickly. Stomachs cramp. Heads ache constantly. Dizziness becomes normal. People stand too fast and black out. Hands tremble when trying to thread a needle or lift a spoon. Work details continue regardless. Hunger is not an excuse. Collapse is punished. Those who cannot keep up are beaten, sent back to the ghetto, or taken away entirely. Children suffer first. Their bodies have no reserves. Cheeks hollow. Eyes grow too large for their faces. Legs thin until knees look oversized, fragile. They cry at night, then stop crying altogether, conserving energy in ways no child ever should. Parents lie to them constantly, promising food that does not exist, meals that will come tomorrow, just a little longer. Soup kitchens operate when they can, serving liquid so thin it barely carries flavor. It smells faintly of boiled turnips or cabbage, though sometimes it smells of nothing at all. People drink it slowly, savoring the warmth more than the taste. When the pot runs dry, those at the back of the line stare into it, as if something might magically reappear. Hunger erodes dignity with ruthless efficiency. People who once took pride in cleanliness stop caring about dirt. Buttons are left undone. Hair goes uncombed. Shame becomes a luxury no one can afford. The only thing that matters is finding something, anything, to eat. Smuggling becomes essential. In the early months, children slip through gaps in fences or broken walls, trading clothing, utensils, even family heirlooms for potatoes or bread from the outside. They move fast, light, unnoticed, until they are noticed. Guards catch them. Shots ring out. Bodies are left where they fall as warnings. Still others try. Hunger outweighs fear. As food disappears, disease takes its place. Overcrowding creates perfect conditions for infection. Entire families share single rooms with no ventilation. People sleep shoulder to shoulder, breath mixing in the stale air. Lice spread rapidly, crawling through seams of clothing, bedding, hair. With lice comes typhus. The fever burns hot and relentless. Victims shiver uncontrollably even when their skin is hot to the touch. Delirium sets in. People speak to those who are not there. Doctors inside the ghetto do what they can, which is almost nothing. There are no medicines, no disinfectants, no clean bandages. Diagnosis becomes observation. Treatment becomes comfort. Hospitals exist in name only. Rooms fill with skeletal figures lying on bare boards, moaning softly or staring into nothing. The smell inside is unbearable, a mix of sweat, waste, sickness, and death. Nurses collapse from exhaustion. Doctors continue working long after they are infected themselves. They know that stopping means surrender, even if continuing means dying. The Germans do not intervene to stop disease. In fact, they encourage it indirectly by cutting rations further, restricting movement, sealing buildings. Disease becomes another tool, another way to weaken the population without firing a shot. Deaths increase daily. Bodies are wrapped in blankets or rags and carried outside. Sometimes they lie in courtyards for hours before burial crews arrive. Sometimes they are buried in shallow graves. Sometimes there is no burial at all. Families grow accustomed to the sight of corpses, stepping around them on the way to fetch water or stand in line. Water itself becomes a problem. Clean sources are limited. Pipes break and are not repaired. People drink from puddles, from melted snow, from anything available. Dysentery spreads quickly. Weak bodies cannot fight it. People waste away even faster. The psychological toll is as devastating as the physical one. Hunger narrows the world. People stop talking about the future. They stop asking questions that require long answers. Conversations revolve around food, what was eaten, what might be eaten, what someone once ate long ago. Memories of meals become a form of torture. Parents make impossible decisions. Should they eat their portion or give it to a child? Should they save food for tomorrow or eat now and risk nothing later? Guilt follows every bite. Love becomes entangled with survival in ways that tear families apart from the inside. Elderly people fade quietly. They stop asking for food, sensing its scarcity. They give their portions away. They lie down and do not get up again. Their deaths often go unnoticed for hours, sometimes days. The ghetto moves too fast for mourning. German inspections continue. Soldiers enter buildings, kicking doors open, shouting orders. Sick people are dragged out of beds and beaten for not standing quickly enough. Entire buildings are quarantined, then emptied. Disease becomes an excuse for executions. Unfit for work becomes a death sentence. Work details grow harsher as bodies grow weaker. Laborers stumble under loads they once carried easily. Some deliberately injure themselves, hoping to avoid being sent out again. This rarely works. Injured workers are replaced, often permanently. Despite everything, the ghetto remains crowded. People continue arriving from other areas, deported, displaced, forced into the same shrinking space. New arrivals bring stories of massacres, of entire communities wiped out. They also bring disease. The cycle accelerates. Children orphaned by hunger and illness roam the ghetto, forming small groups, scavenging for scraps. They look much older than they are, faces hardened by exposure to death. Some steal, some beg. Many simply disappear. Religious practice, already suppressed, becomes almost impossible. Yet some still whisper prayers, not for deliverance, but for strength to endure another day. Faith shifts shape. It becomes less about salvation and more about meaning and suffering. At night, hunger makes sleep impossible. Stomachs growl loudly in the darkness. People lie awake listening to others breathe, cough, moan. Gunshots punctuate the silence without warning. No one reacts anymore. Fear, like hunger, becomes background noise. The Germans reduce rations again. The announcement is brief, unemotional. Numbers on paper change. Inside the ghetto, lives shorten. The Judenrat struggles to respond. There is nothing left to distribute. Soup kitchens close. Workers collapse during meetings. Council members look visibly ill themselves. Administration cannot fight biology. Hunger and disease do not negotiate. Doctors begin keeping informal counts of deaths, though the numbers quickly become overwhelming. Names blur together. Faces repeat in memory until they do not. Even professionals trained to heal begin to detach emotionally, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Some people attempt to escape despite the risks, slipping out during work details or bribing guards. Many are caught and killed. Those who succeed often bring back food or information, briefly lifting spirits before reality closes in again. As winter deepens, the cold compounds everything. Bodies without fat cannot retain heat. People sleep fully clothed, huddled together. Fingers turn blue. Frostbite appears even indoors. The dead freeze where they lie. The ghetto begins to smell different, not just of waste or smoke, but of decay. A sweet, sickly odor lingers in stairwells and courtyards. It becomes impossible to ignore. Death is no longer an event. It is an environment. And yet, even here, life refuses to vanish completely. A mother sings softly to a child with a fever. A man shares his last piece of bread with a stranger. A doctor stays awake through the night, holding the hand of someone who will not survive until morning. These moments do not change the outcome, but they matter. Hunger and disease do what bullets cannot. They break the body slowly, stripping strength, will, and resistance piece by piece. They make people easier to control, easier to move, easier to kill. This is not accidental. It is designed. By the time spring approaches, the ghetto population has already been reduced by thousands. Those who remain are shadows of who they once were. Walking skeletons wrapped in rags. Eyes dulled by exhaustion. Voices reduced to whispers. The Germans observe this with satisfaction. A weakened population is easier to manage, easier to eliminate when the time comes. And that time is drawing closer, because hunger and disease were never meant to be the final weapon. They were only meant to prepare the ghetto for what comes next. Soon, starvation will no longer be slow, and death will no longer be quiet. Chapter 6. Deportees from the Reich. They arrive not as refugees fleeing chaos, but as passengers delivered by timetable. Trains roll in with doors sealed, schedules followed, paperwork stamped. For those already trapped inside the Minsk Ghetto, the sound of these trains is unfamiliar in its precision. This is not the wild violence of invasion or the random cruelty of street terror. This is something colder, quieter, organized. The rails hum with intention. When the doors finally open, the first thing people notice is the way the newcomers look. Their coats are better cut. Their shoes, though worn, are intact. Some carry suitcases with name tags still attached, labels from cities that feel impossibly far away. Berlin, Vienna, Prague. Many wear hats. Some women have styled hair. These are Jews deported from the German Reich and its annexed territories, transported east under orders that promised resettlement, labor, safety. They step down stiffly, blinking in the harsh light, trying to orient themselves in a place that does not resemble the future they were sold. Inside the ghetto, whispers spread quickly. Who are they? Where do they come from? Why do they look like this? The local Jews, already starved and hollowed by months of deprivation, watch with a mixture of disbelief and dread. The contrast is painful. These newcomers do not yet carry the physical markers of Minsk: sunken eyes, skeletal frames, the permanent stoop of hunger. They still look like people from another world. The deportees are herded through streets lined with barbed wire and armed guards. They smell the ghetto before they fully see it. The odor of waste, smoke, unwashed bodies, and sickness hits hard, clinging to clothing, filling the lungs. Faces turn pale. Some whisper questions. Others remain silent, gripping luggage handles as if the objects themselves might anchor them to reality. German orders are barked sharply. Move. Faster. Stop. Luggage is confiscated almost immediately, piled carelessly, and hauled away. People protest weakly, insisting they were told they could bring their belongings, that these were permitted. The soldiers do not respond. The suitcases disappear. With them go the last illusions of control. The deportees are assigned to special sections of the ghetto, often separated from local Jews at first. Officially, this is administrative convenience. In practice, it deepens isolation. The newcomers cling to one another, speaking German, clinging to habits and manners shaped by a world that no longer exists. They are exhausted from the journey, but still believe, at some level, that rules apply, that logic might protect them. Local Jews watch with a different understanding. They have already learned what the Germans are capable of. They recognize the trap immediately. Sympathy mixes with bitterness. Some resent the extra mouths to feed. Others feel a sharp, aching sorrow, seeing themselves as they once were, before Minsk stripped them down to survival alone. The deportees are confused by the ghetto's rhythms. They ask about ration cards, housing assignments, employment offices. They expect order. Instead, they encounter chaos. Overcrowded rooms. Starving families. Children who do not smile. When they ask where the soup kitchen is, the answer is often a shrug. When they ask when conditions will improve, the response is silence. Language becomes a barrier. Yiddish bridges some gaps, but accents differ, meanings shift. Cultural habits clash. The deportees from the Reich often carry a sense of dignity rooted in law, in citizenship, in the belief that even discrimination has limits. Minsk has already destroyed those beliefs. The locals know that dignity is now dangerous, that visibility invites violence. German authorities exploit these differences deliberately. They present the deportations as proof that Minsk is a destination, not an endpoint. They allow the newcomers to believe, briefly, that labor and compliance might lead to survival. For some, this hope lasts days. For others, weeks. For many, it will be fatal. The Judenrat struggles to integrate the deportees into an already collapsing system. Housing is impossible. Food distribution barely exists. Labor assignments multiply. Every arrival means less for everyone else. Tensions flare. Arguments erupt over space, over crumbs of bread, over access to water. Hunger does not tolerate misunderstanding. Children from the Reich stare at local children with a mix of fear and fascination. They have never seen bodies this thin, eyes this empty. They ask their parents why these children look sick. Parents lie, telling them it is temporary, that things will be different soon. Some parents believe this lie themselves, clinging to it as a form of psychological shelter. Within days, disease begins to move through the deportee population as well. Typhus does not care about passports or accents. Lice spread quickly in overcrowded quarters. Fever takes hold. The newcomers experience the ghetto's reality not gradually, but all at once, like being thrown into freezing water. Their bodies, unprepared for the conditions, weaken rapidly. Some deportees attempt to assert their rights. They write petitions. They request meetings. They demand explanations. The Germans ignore them or mock them openly. This refusal to engage is more devastating than violence. It reveals that there is no system to appeal to, no authority above the cruelty. There is only power. The first selections come quietly. German officers arrive with lists, calling out names from among the deportees. Those selected are told they are being relocated to better accommodations or sent to work. They are instructed to prepare, to remain calm. Families are separated with practiced efficiency. The chosen are marched away. They do not return. Rumors circulate almost immediately. Some say the deportees were shot outside the city. Others say they were sent to camps. Some insist they are alive somewhere, working. No one knows for certain. But the pattern is familiar. Minsk has seen this before. The deportees have not. A gulf opens between those who understand what is happening and those who still cannot believe it. Local Jews try to warn the newcomers, speaking carefully, quietly, choosing words that will not provoke panic. Do not trust announcements. Do not believe promises. Hide when you can. Some deportees listen. Others recoil, offended by what sounds like hysteria. The idea that a modern state could be lying so completely is too much to accept. The Germans tighten control. Curfews are enforced more strictly. Guards patrol deportee quarters with particular cruelty, testing obedience, punishing hesitation. Beatings become common. The shock of sudden violence breaks many psychologically. People who once lived by schedules and rules now exist in a world where time itself feels unstable. Some deportees attempt to integrate with local resistance networks, though few understand how dangerous this is. Others are recruited unknowingly as informants, pressured or tricked into providing information in exchange for extra food or protection. Trust erodes further. The ghetto fractures along lines of origin, experience, desperation. Despite everything, moments of connection occur. A local woman teaches a deportee how to barter with guards using cigarettes. A man from Vienna shares a memory of coffee houses that feels almost obscene in its luxury, yet strangely comforting. Songs are exchanged. Words are learned. Humanity persists in fragments. The Germans begin to use the deportees as tools of terror. Public executions include newly arrived Jews, chosen to demonstrate that origin offers no protection. The message is clear. No one is exempt. The Reich has followed you here. As weeks pass, the deportees change visibly. Hunger reshapes them. Fear settles into their posture. Their clothes hang loosely. Their eyes lose the brightness that once marked them as different. Minsk absorbs them, the way it absorbs everything, grinding individuality down into survival. Some deportees, particularly the young and strong, are sent to forced labor sites outside the ghetto. They march out at dawn under guard, returning after dark if they return at all. Others are selected for special actions that leave entire rooms empty by morning. The pace of disappearance accelerates. The psychological impact on the local population is profound. The arrival of the deportees initially brought a strange sense of validation, proof that what was happening in Minsk was part of something larger, systematic. But as the deportees are destroyed just as efficiently, that validation turns into despair. If even those from the heart of Europe cannot survive, then what hope remains? The Germans achieve multiple objectives at once. They reduce overcrowding through murder. They deepen divisions within the ghetto. They reinforce the lesson that compliance offers no safety. And they test methods that will be used elsewhere on an even larger scale. For the deportees, the final understanding often comes too late. It arrives in the form of gunfire heard from behind a building, or the absence of neighbors who were alive the night before. It arrives in the realization that the future they were promised was a lie constructed to keep them passive until they could be destroyed efficiently. Yet even among the deportees, resistance sparks. Some refuse to line up. Some hide during selections. Some destroy their own documents, erasing the bureaucratic identities that make them easier to track. These acts are small, often futile, but they matter. They reclaim agency in a system designed to erase it. The presence of the deportees changes the ghetto irreversibly. It accelerates the pace of killing. It expands the scope of suffering. It strips away remaining illusions. Minsk is no longer just a place of confinement. It is a destination for death. As winter tightens its grip again, the ghetto grows quieter. Fewer voices, fewer footsteps, more empty spaces. The deportees who remain are indistinguishable now from those who have been there since the beginning. Hunger has leveled them. Fear has unified them. The trains continue to come. Each arrival is smaller than the last. Each departure emptier. The cycle becomes routine. The Germans perfect their process. Inside the ghetto, a realization hardens into certainty. Waiting for mercy is pointless. Appeals to reason are meaningless. Survival will not come from compliance, or hope, or patience. It will come from refusal, from hiding, from disappearing, and from building a world the Germans cannot easily reach. Beneath the city itself. Chapter 7. The first mass action. The sound comes before the meaning. Trucks grinding to a halt. Boots striking pavement in hurried clusters. Doors kicked open hard enough to splinter wood. People wake to shouting in German and Belarusian, to the crack of rifle butts against walls, to the sudden understanding that this morning is not like the others. In the Minsk Ghetto, fear has become routine, but this is different. This feels deliberate, final. The first mass action begins before sunrise. Floodlights cut through the darkness, turning courtyards into stark, white stages where there is nowhere to hide. Names are shouted. People stumble out half-dressed, clutching children, pulling on coats with numb fingers. Those who hesitate are dragged. Those who ask questions are struck. Orders come fast, overlapping, designed to confuse as much as to control. This is not a raid for labor. There are no lists to appeal, no quotas to fill. The Germans move with a certainty that chills everyone watching. Entire buildings are emptied at once. Families are separated within seconds. Men pulled to one side, women and children to another. The screaming begins almost immediately, raw and uncontrollable, tearing through the morning air. Some people believe, desperately, that this is relocation. They cling to the word because it sounds less permanent than what their instincts are telling them. Others know better. They have heard the gunfire outside the city. They have seen neighbors disappear. They recognize the pattern forming in the soldiers' movements. This is not about where people are going. Columns of Jews are forced to march through the ghetto streets under armed guard. Windows are shut tight as they pass. Curtains twitch, then fall still. No one wants to be seen watching. The streets feel unnaturally wide, emptied of anyone not being marched toward death. The only sounds are boots, sobbing, and the occasional shot fired to hurry the line forward. The destination lies beyond the ghetto, near ravines and forests already scarred by earlier killings. The earth there has been disturbed before. It knows what is coming. Trucks unload people in groups. Belongings are stripped away. Coats, shoes, bags, piled methodically as if order itself might disguise the brutality of the act. People are told to stand still, to face away, to wait. Shots ring out in rapid succession. Bodies fall forward, backward, sideways, collapsing into one another. The killing is efficient, practiced. Executioners rotate to avoid fatigue. The air fills with the smell of gunpowder and blood. The ground becomes slick. Those not killed instantly are shot again, or buried alive beneath the weight of others. Back in the ghetto, the absence becomes noticeable before confirmation arrives. Buildings are quieter. Entire stairwells are empty. Children search for friends who are no longer there. Mothers sit on beds, staring at doorways, listening for footsteps that will never return. The Judenrat receives reports piecemeal, incomplete, whispered. Numbers begin to circulate. Hundreds, then thousands. No one knows the exact count. It hardly matters. The scale alone is devastating. The Germans do not hide what they have done. They want the ghetto to understand. They want fear to do the work of control. Public announcements follow, cold and bureaucratic, warning of further actions against anyone who resists, hides, or fails to comply. The language is impersonal. The meaning is not. Within days, another action follows. This time it is faster. The soldiers know the layout now. They know which buildings hold more people, which courtyards funnel bodies efficiently. People try to hide, under beds and attics behind false walls, but hiding without preparation is useless. German patrols move methodically, prodding with bayonets, tearing up floorboards, listening for breath. The streets become scenes of chaos. Children are ripped from arms. Elderly people collapse and are shot where they fall. Some parents attempt the unthinkable, pushing children into doorways, shoving them behind strangers, hoping invisibility might save them. Sometimes it does. Often it does not. The psychological impact is immediate and profound. Panic spreads faster than information. People stop sleeping altogether, afraid to close their eyes. Every sound becomes a threat. The knock of a door, the scrape of boots, even raised voices inside the ghetto trigger terror responses. Life contracts to a single question. Will this be the day? German forces refine their tactics. They arrive without warning. They vary times. They target different sections, unpredictably. The goal is not just killing. It is breaking the population's ability to anticipate, to prepare, to resist. Uncertainty becomes a weapon. The Judenrat is forced to cooperate directly during action in order to provide information, to assist with crowd control, to identify troublemakers. Refusal results in immediate executions. Council members comply outwardly while trying, desperately, to sabotage where possible, misdirecting patrols, delaying lists, creating confusion. These efforts save some lives. They doom others. The moral weight is unbearable. Some Jews attempt to fight back during the action and knives appear. Stones are thrown. A few German soldiers are injured. The response is immediate and overwhelming. Machine guns rake buildings. Entire blocks are punished. The message is reinforced. Resistance will be collective suicide. And yet, the attempts do not stop. Desperation breeds courage. Courage breeds defiance. Even futile resistance becomes a statement that death will not be met with silence. As the action continue, the composition of the ghetto changes. The weakest are gone first. Children, the elderly, the sick. Those who remain are younger, stronger, more alert. Survival begins to depend on speed of reaction and willingness to disappear at a moment's notice. People begin sleeping fully dressed, shoes on, documents hidden close to the body. Word spreads of earlier killings carried out by the Einsatzgruppen in nearby regions. The rumors are no longer vague. Survivors from outside Minsk bring confirmation. Entire communities erased. No camps. No resettlement. Just bullets and earth. The truth hardens into certainty. This knowledge changes everything. Compliance loses whatever illusion of safety it once had. People begin to understand that the ghetto is not a place of waiting, but a funnel. The actionen are not punishments. They are steps. During one action, a group of Jews manages to break away while being marched. They scatter into side streets, pursued by gunfire. Most are killed. A few vanish into basements and crawl spaces. The Germans respond by sealing buildings and setting them on fire. Smoke pours into the streets, thick and choking. Those hiding inside are forced out or burned alive. The smell lingers for days. Children witness things no one should ever see. They watch parents shot. They step over bodies. They learn to be silent in ways that defy instinct. Some become messengers, slipping through chaos unnoticed, carrying warnings from building to building. Their small size becomes an advantage. Their childhood disappears entirely. The ghetto's population shrinks rapidly. After each action, people count losses obsessively, reciting names, checking rooms, searching faces. Every survival feels temporary, stolen from time that is running out. The dead are not mourned properly. There is no space, no energy, no safety for grief. German propaganda within the ghetto intensifies. Notice his promise that those who comply will be spared, that laborers are safe, that order will bring stability. The lies are transparent now, but they still work on some. Hope is a powerful sedative. The actionen also expose something else, patterns. Survivors notice which buildings are targeted first, which streets are blocked, which hours are favored. This information circulates quietly. People begin mapping danger mentally. The idea of systematic hiding begins to take form, not as a temporary measure, but as a way of life. Cellars are examined. Basements cleared. Floorboards loosened. Spaces between walls measured. At first, these preparations are rudimentary, improvised, driven by instinct rather than planning. But each action teaches lessons written in blood. Those lessons are remembered. The Germans escalate brutality further. Entire families are executed together to discourage resistance rooted in kinship. Children are shot in front of parents. Parents are forced to watch. Trauma becomes deliberate, calculated. The aim is not just to kill bodies, but to annihilate will. And yet, something unexpected happens. The sheer scale of violence strips away fear's effectiveness. When death is certain, terror loses its leverage. Among some, clarity emerges. If survival through obedience is impossible, then other paths must be found. After one particularly devastating action, silence falls over the ghetto, unlike anything before. No crying, no shouting, just a stunned stillness. People sit where they are, staring at nothing. The air feels heavier, as if saturated with loss. That night, whispers move through the darkness. Not rumors this time, but plans. Talk of digging, of hiding not just for hours, but for weeks, of disappearing completely during actionen rather than reacting to them. The ground beneath Minsk, riddled with old foundations and forgotten spaces, becomes an object of focus. The Germans believe they are succeeding, and in one sense they are. Thousands are dead. Terror reigns. The population is weakened, but they are also forcing adaptation. Each action teaches survivors how the machine works and how it might be evaded. The first mass action mark a turning point. They strip away illusion. They end the belief that the ghetto exists to exploit labor alone. They reveal the truth in unmistakable terms. This is not about work. It is not about punishment. It is about annihilation. And as the last echoes of gunfire fade into the forests outside Minsk, those who remain alive understand something with terrible clarity. Waiting in the open is no longer an option. To survive what is coming next, They will have to do more than endure. They will have to vanish. Chapter 8: Malinas, the Underground City. The idea does not arrive fully formed. It begins as a reflex, a moment of instinct when someone ducks into a cellar during a raid and realizes the sound of boots above is fading, not growing louder. It grows when another person survives by hiding beneath floorboards, listening to gunfire echo through walls that do not reach all the way down. It hardens into knowledge when entire families live through an action not by fleeing, not by fighting, but by disappearing into the ground itself. In the Minsk Ghetto, the earth becomes shelter. The buildings above are old, layered, built and rebuilt over decades. Beneath them lie basements, storage rooms, forgotten crawl spaces, remnants of older foundations. Some are dry, many are damp, all are dark. Before the war, these spaces held coal, potatoes, tools. Now they begin to hold people. At first, only briefly, during raids, during inspections, for an hour, maybe two, long enough for danger to pass. But as the action grow more frequent and more lethal, temporary hiding is no longer enough. Survival requires something more deliberate, more permanent. People begin to dig. The work starts quietly, often at night, using whatever tools can be found: knives, spoons, broken boards, bare hands. Dirt is removed slowly, hidden in clothing, scattered in courtyards, flushed away in small amounts. Every sound is a risk. Every movement must be calculated. The ghetto above remains deadly. The world below must remain invisible. These hiding places come to be known as malinas. The word spreads in whispers, never spoken loudly. A malina is not just a hole. It is a promise, a gamble, a declaration that survival will not be left to chance. Some malinas are no larger than closets, meant to hide one or two people for a few hours. Others expand into elaborate chambers, reinforced with wooden beams, connected by narrow tunnels that link buildings together beneath the street. Families debate endlessly whether to build one. Digging requires strength, time, secrecy. It risks discovery, which means death for everyone involved. But not digging carries its own certainty. After the first mass action, many understand that being visible is more dangerous than being buried alive. The first people to commit fully are often craftsmen, carpenters, builders, men who understand structure and weight. They calculate how much earth can be removed without collapsing the floor above. They reinforce ceilings with scavenged wood, bed frames, anything that might hold. Every malina is an act of engineering under terror. Women play a crucial role. They carry away dirt hidden beneath skirts. They stand watch while digging occurs. They organize supplies, candles, water, scraps of food, cloth to absorb sound. Children are instructed never to speak of what is being built, even to friends. Secrecy becomes a form of discipline learned early. As the malinas grow, so does their purpose. They are no longer just shelters during action. They become places where people live. Entire families descend underground for days, sometimes weeks, emerging only when it is safe or when hunger forces them to risk exposure. Life above ground becomes a facade, maintained only when necessary. Inside the malinas, conditions are brutal. There is little air. Candles flicker weakly, consuming oxygen. Smoke has nowhere to go. People sit shoulder to shoulder, barely able to stretch. The smell of damp earth mixes with sweat and fear. Children are taught to suppress coughs, to cry silently, to breathe shallowly. Silence is survival. Time behaves strangely underground. Without light, days blur together. People count hours by the drip of water or the change in temperature. Sleep comes in fragments. Hunger gnaws constantly. Conversations are whispered, often about nothing at all, simply to remind one another that they are still human. Some malinas are well planned, stocked with food smuggled over months, equipped with multiple exits disguised beneath floorboards or furniture. Others are desperate constructions, barely adequate, collapsing under their own weight or flooding during rain. Not all malinas succeed. Some become tombs. The Germans are not blind to the phenomenon. They begin to suspect that Jews are surviving action in greater numbers than expected. Patrols change tactics. Floors are struck with rifle butts. Dogs are brought in. Buildings are searched repeatedly. The hunt moves downward. When a malina is discovered, the consequences are immediate and horrific. Soldiers tear open floors, dragging people out into the light. Sometimes they shoot them on the spot. Sometimes they force them to reveal other hiding places. Fire becomes a favored weapon. Buildings are set ablaze, smoke forced into underground spaces, suffocating those inside. The screams that follow haunt the ghetto long after the flames die down. And yet, even as malinas are destroyed, more are built. Knowledge spreads. Survivors share lessons learned at terrible cost. Ventilation holes must be hidden carefully. Dirt must be disposed of slowly. Escape routes must exist. Trust must be absolute. Betrayal means annihilation. The underground begins to connect. Tunnels link malinas across courtyards and streets, creating networks beneath the ghetto. People move unseen, passing information, food, warnings. The Germans control the streets, but beneath them, a different city is taking shape. This underground city is not organized by maps or names, but by relationships. Who trusts whom? Who can keep silent? Who will share their last crust of bread? Bonds deepen quickly under such conditions. Arguments still occur, often over space, over noise, over fear. But survival depends on cooperation, and most understand this instinctively. Children adapt with frightening speed. They learn the layout of tunnels like playgrounds that cannot be played in. They remember which turns to take, which boards to lift, which sounds mean danger. Their bodies grow thin, but their awareness sharpens. Childhood is replaced by vigilance. Life underground is punctuated by terror above. When an action begins, the malinas fill silently. People descend through trapdoors and hidden panels, pulling them shut with trembling hands. Then they wait. Boots pass overhead. Voices shout. Shots ring out. Sometimes blood seeps through cracks in the ceiling. People hold their breath, praying the boards will not give way. Hours pass, sometimes days. When silence finally settles, no one moves at first. The risk of emerging too soon is enormous. When someone finally dares to listen at a vent or crack, the tension is unbearable. If the coast is clear, one person emerges, then another, blinking in the light like creatures from another world. Those who survive in action, through hiding, experience a complex mix of relief and guilt. Relief at being alive. Guilt at having lived while neighbors died above them. This guilt does not stop them from hiding again. Survival overrides everything. The malinas also become centers of resistance. Weapons are hidden underground. Messages are passed. Plans are made. The underground offers not just concealment, but possibility. It is the one space the Germans do not fully control, and that makes it powerful. Some malinas shelter dozens of people at a time. These require strict rules. No movement during raids. No speaking above whispers. Waste managed carefully. Food rationed precisely. Leadership emerges naturally, often taken by those with experience or authority. Disputes are settled quietly. Violence inside a malina could doom everyone. Disease remains a constant threat. Crowded, poorly ventilated spaces are breeding grounds for illness. A single cough can spread fear as quickly as infection. Sick individuals are isolated when possible, though space is rarely sufficient. Some choose to leave malinas voluntarily when they realize they are ill, sacrificing themselves to protect others. These decisions are made without discussion, without drama, and they devastate everyone involved. The Germans escalate their countermeasures. Buildings suspected of hiding malinas are demolished entirely. Streets are torn up. Flooding is used to drown underground chambers. Poison gas is pumped into basements. The underground city responds by adapting, digging deeper, reinforcing better, creating false malinas to mislead searchers. The struggle becomes one of innovation versus brutality. Each side learns from the other. Each discovery leads to new tactics. The stakes remain absolute. Despite everything, the malinas hold. They save thousands of lives. They transform the ghetto from a passive space of waiting into an active landscape of resistance and survival. They prove that even under total domination, humans will find ways to carve out freedom, however narrow and temporary. At night, when the city above grows quiet, the underground hums softly with life. People whisper stories. They remember birthdays. They teach children to read by candlelight. They plan futures they may never see. These acts are defiant in their ordinariness. The existence of the underground city changes how people see themselves. They are no longer just victims. They are builders, engineers, survivors. Every tunnel dug is a refusal. Every malina completed is a statement that extermination will not be met passively. But the underground also demands a terrible price. Living buried erodes the body and mind. Claustrophobia becomes constant. Darkness presses inward. The fear of discovery never fades. Even those who survive emerge altered, haunted by the memory of Earth inches above their faces. As the months pass, it becomes clear that the Germans will not stop. They will keep searching. They will keep killing. The underground city cannot save everyone forever. It can delay. It can disrupt. It can allow resistance to grow. But time is running out. Still, for now, the malinas hold. Beneath the streets of Minsk, beneath the boots and banners and bullets, an invisible city breathes in darkness. It is fragile. It is temporary. But it is alive. And as long as it exists, the story of the Minsk Ghetto is no longer just one of confinement and death. It is also a story of disappearance, defiance, and the desperate genius of survival. Chapter 9. Resistance in the Shadows. Resistance does not announce itself with banners or speeches. In the Minsk Ghetto, it begins as a murmur passed between trusted mouths, a glance held a moment too long, a question asked quietly after dark. It grows in the spaces where fear and certainty collide, where people finally understand that survival through obedience has failed and waiting politely for death is no longer an option. By the time the underground city takes shape beneath Minsk, resistance has already been born above it. It emerges from workers forced out of the ghetto, each morning under guard. Men and women who see the city beyond the fences and realize that the Germans are not invincible. They observe patrol routes. They note which guards drink on duty, which can be bribed, which look away if paid enough. They listen to rumors carried by Soviet civilians, fragments of a larger war unfolding beyond the ghetto's suffocating walls. The malinas become more than hiding places. They become meeting rooms, planning chambers, classrooms where people teach one another how to sabotage, how to lie convincingly, how to pass unnoticed. Maps are drawn from memory. Weapons are discussed in whispers. The underground is not unified, not centralized. It is fragmented, cautious, shaped by paranoia earned through blood. Some resistance cells form around former soldiers of the Red Army who were trapped in Minsk during the invasion. They bring with them knowledge of tactics, explosives, communication. Others are led by young people, students, factory workers, couriers, who have little formal training but an abundance of nerve. Gender matters less than courage. Women move more freely through the ghetto and beyond it, often underestimated by guards. They become couriers, smugglers, scouts. Weapons are scarce. A single pistol is a treasure. Ammunition is counted obsessively. Knives, axes, tools become instruments of potential revolt. Some weapons are stolen from German depots during labor assignments. Others are acquired through trade with Soviet partisans operating in nearby forests. Each acquisition is a risk that could expose entire networks. The resistance understands quickly that open rebellion inside the ghetto would be suicide. There are too many guards, too many machine guns, too many hostages who would pay the price. Instead, they choose a different strategy. Information, sabotage, escape, survival as defiance. Work details become opportunities. Laborers damage equipment subtly, just enough to slow production without drawing immediate suspicion. Machines are misaligned. Tools go missing. Fuel is contaminated. These acts seem insignificant on their own, but together they frustrate German efficiency. Every delay matters. Smuggling intensifies. Food, weapons, medicine, newspapers all move through invisible channels beneath the ghetto. Children play a critical role, slipping through gaps in sewers, carrying messages folded into shoes or hidden in hair. Their small size and seeming innocence grant them access adults no longer have. Many are caught. Some are killed. The work continues regardless. The resistance also focuses on escape. Not everyone can flee, but some can. Those with contacts outside the ghetto, those strong enough to travel, those willing to risk being hunted down. These are guided through tunnels, sewers, and forests toward partisan units. Each successful escape is a victory measured not just in lives saved, but in hope preserved. The forests surrounding Minsk become symbols of possibility. Soviet partisan groups operate there, harassing German supply lines, ambushing patrols, sabotaging railways. Contact with them is dangerous, but transformative. For those who reach the partisans, survival becomes active rather than passive. They fight back. Inside the ghetto, the resistance wrestles constantly with moral dilemmas. Is it right to endanger many to save a few? Should weapons be used to kill guards if reprisals will follow? Is it better to hide families underground or help fighters escape to continue the struggle elsewhere? There are no clear answers. Every choice carries death in its shadow. German counterintelligence works tirelessly to infiltrate the underground. Informants are recruited through coercion, hunger, and promises of survival. Suspicion becomes a permanent state of mind. Cells compartmentalize. Names are withheld. Meetings are rare and brief. Trust is earned slowly and revoked instantly. When informants are discovered, punishment is swift and brutal. Executions are carried out quietly, often underground, to avoid attracting attention. These moments haunt everyone involved. Killing a traitor does not feel like justice. It feels like another fracture of the soul forced by circumstance. Acts of overt resistance do occur, though they are rare and carefully chosen. A German officer is stabbed during a nighttime patrol. A warehouse storing confiscated Jewish property is set ablaze. Shots are fired from rooftops during an action, creating confusion that allows dozens to vanish underground. These acts are small in military terms, but enormous psychologically. They prove that the ghetto is not entirely submissive. The Germans respond with predictable savagery. Reprisals are collective. Hostages are executed. Buildings are burned. Searches intensify. The message is clear. Resistance will be paid for in Jewish blood. The resistance understands this. They continue anyway. Women in the resistance face particular dangers. If caught, they are tortured mercilessly. Yet they persist, exploiting stereotypes that render them less suspicious. They carry explosives disguised as food. They transport messages hidden in clothing seams. They move between worlds with deadly purpose. The underground also preserves culture as an act of resistance. Songs are taught. Poems are memorized. Stories of pre-war life are repeated to children who barely remember it. Education continues secretly. To remember who they were is to resist who the Germans want them to become. As time passes, the resistance becomes more coordinated. Links are established between ghetto fighters and partisans outside. Escape routes are standardized. Signal systems are developed. Codes replace open speech. The underground city beneath Minsk becomes a nerve center of quiet rebellion. Not everyone supports the resistance. Some fear the consequences too much. Others believe survival lies in compliance. These divisions are painful, but inevitable. The resistance does not force participation. It cannot afford to. Secrecy depends on consent. One of the most dangerous operations involves forging documents for escapees. Papers identifying Jews as non-Jewish civilians or laborers are created painstakingly, often using stolen stamps or memorized signatures. A single mistake can mean death. Forgers work in near darkness, hands shaking, knowing that their work might save a life or doom it. The resistance also collects evidence. names of perpetrators, dates of action, and locations of mass graves. Testimonies are recorded when possible, written on scraps of paper hidden in jars or walls. There is an understanding that even if they do not survive, the truth must. The Germans sense that control is slipping in subtle ways. Action and yield fewer bodies than expected. Searches turn up empty buildings. The underground remains elusive. Frustration turns to rage. Countermeasures grow more extreme. Dogs are deployed. Buildings are demolished entirely. Flooding and gas are used to clear malinas. Yet for every hiding place destroyed, another is built deeper, smarter, harder to detect. The struggle becomes one of adaptation versus annihilation. Resistance exacts a toll on those who fight it. Constant fear, sleeplessness, the weight of responsibility. Fighters know that their actions may bring death to others. This knowledge never fades. It becomes part of them. And yet, despite the cost, resistance changes the meaning of survival. To live is no longer just to breathe. It is to act, to choose, to refuse erasure. By the time the Germans begin planning the final liquidation of the Minsk Ghetto, they do so with an awareness that this population is not passive. It hides. It fights. It escapes. It refuses to vanish quietly. The underground has transformed the ghetto into something the Germans did not anticipate, a place where death is expected, but submission is not guaranteed. The resistance does not believe it will win. It does not imagine liberation arriving in time for most. What it believes in instead is dignity, agency, and the obligation to fight against annihilation, even when defeat is certain. As whispers circulate of an impending final action, resistance members prepare not for survival alone, but for disruption. Plans are made to evacuate malinas, to guide escapees to the forests, to strike where possible, not to change the outcome, but to shape it. The underground city braces itself. Above ground, the Germans prepare their final move. And between them lies a truth forged in darkness and defiance. The Minsk Ghetto will not go quietly. It will resist, even if resistance is the last thing it ever does. Chapter 10. The Great Liquidation begins. It starts with silence, so complete it feels artificial, as if the ghetto itself has been muffled. No shouting, no early patrols, no trucks rumbling at dawn. For those who have learned to measure danger by sound, this quiet is worse than noise. It presses in on the chest, heavy and deliberate. People wake before sunrise and lie still, listening for something that does not come, already knowing that when it does, it will be too late. Then the perimeter closes. German units appear at every exit simultaneously, sealing the ghetto with a precision that leaves no doubt this has been planned for weeks, perhaps months. Streets are blocked with armored vehicles. Machine guns are mounted at intersections, angled inward. Guard towers bristle with movement. There is no announcement at first, no explanation, just containment. The message is unmistakable. No one is leaving. Inside the ghetto, word spreads faster than sound. People move in silence, slipping into malinas, pulling trapdoors shut, sealing themselves into darkness with practiced efficiency. Families who hesitated in the past do not hesitate now. Those without hiding places rush toward friends, neighbors, anyone who might offer space beneath the floor. Some are turned away, not out of cruelty, but out of fear that overcrowding will betray everyone. By mid-morning, the silence shatters. Orders bark through loudspeakers, tear through the air, distorted and metallic. Jews are ordered to assemble, to leave their buildings, to bring documents, to report for relocation. The words are familiar. The lie is familiar. This time, no one believes it. The first buildings are stormed without warning. Doors are kicked in. Grenades are thrown into stairwells. Smoke pours through hallways, choking those still inside. Soldiers drag people from hiding places discovered by chance or betrayal. Those who resist are shot on the spot. The killing is no longer selective. It is systematic. This is not an action. This is liquidation. Entire blocks are emptied in hours. People are driven into the streets in frantic waves, herded toward collection points surrounded by armed guards. The elderly collapse almost immediately, bodies unable to keep pace. Children stumble, pulled along by adults who know that stopping means death. Shots ring out constantly, not as punishment, but as rhythm. Gunfire used to keep the crowd moving. The Germans have learned from every previous action. They move faster now. They seal buildings after clearing them, marking doors with chalk or paint. They use dogs to locate hidden malinas. When dogs bark at the ground, soldiers pry open floors without hesitation. Those found underground are dragged into the light, blinking, gasping, covered in dirt and blood. Some malinas hold. Others become graves. Smoke is pumped into basements and tunnels, thick and acrid. People suffocate in darkness, clawing at earth that does not yield. Fires are set deliberately to force survivors out. Buildings burn block by block, turning the ghetto into a landscape of flame and ash. The smell is overwhelming. Burning wood, flesh, and everything people once owned. Resistance flares where it can. Shots are fired from windows. Grenades are thrown from rooftops. Fighters emerge briefly from tunnels to attack patrols before vanishing again. These moments are short, violent, and costly. For every German injured, dozens of Jews are killed in reprisal. Still, the resistance continues. Not because it can win, but because surrender is meaningless now. The collection points overflow with humanity pressed together in terror. People cling to one another, whispering names, prayers, apologies. Some parents smother their children's mouths to keep them from crying. Others lift children onto shoulders, trying to keep them above the crush. Guards move along the perimeter, selecting groups to be marched away. Trucks arrive. People are loaded in tightly, stacked like cargo. Some are shot before they reach the vehicles, chosen arbitrarily to maintain fear. Others are driven out of the ghetto toward forests and ravines that have already swallowed thousands. Those who understand what awaits begin to scream. Those who do not will understand soon enough. Inside the ghetto, pockets of life still exist beneath the ground. Malinas remain sealed, occupants listening to destruction unfold above them. The earth shakes from explosions. Dust falls from ceilings. Air grows thin. People ration breaths, pressing cloths to mouths, counting heartbeats instead of hours. Children are held so tightly their ribs ache. Above ground, German units sweep methodically, building by building, street by street. The efficiency is chilling. This is not chaos. It is procedure. Each unit has a role. Each phase follows the last without pause. The Minsk Ghetto is being erased with administrative precision. The Judenrat is summoned one final time. Some members are executed immediately. Others are forced to assist in directing people toward collection points, knowing they are sending them to death. Their faces are hollow, movements mechanical. When their usefulness ends, they are shot as well. There will be no witnesses left to interpret this as governance rather than extermination. As night falls, fires illuminate the sky. Smoke drifts for kilometers, visible far beyond the city. The ghetto glows like a funeral pyre. Gunfire continues into the darkness, punctuated by screams and the roar of collapsing buildings. Sleep is impossible for anyone still alive. Some malinas open under cover of night. Survivors emerge cautiously, surveying a world that no longer resembles a city. Streets are unrecognizable, littered with bodies and debris. Buildings are skeletal shells. The familiar geography of the ghetto has been obliterated. Those who emerge must decide quickly, risk discovery above ground, or remain buried, and hope the killing passes them by. Few illusions remain. There is no relocation, no labor resettlement, no survival through compliance. This is the final stage. German patrols tighten further, sweeping again and again to ensure no one remains. Flooding is used to drown underground chambers. Poison gas is pumped into suspected hiding areas. Explosives collapse tunnels. The underground city, so carefully built, is under direct assault. And yet, even now, people survive. Some tunnels lead beyond the ghetto perimeter, into sewers and forgotten drainage systems. Small groups crawl through filth and darkness, guided by memory and desperation. Those who emerge outside the ghetto slip into the city or flee toward forests under cover of smoke and chaos. Many are caught and killed. Some reach safety. Children are pushed through openings too small for adults. Parents press final instructions into their ears, then seal the entrance behind them. These are not moments of heroism, as history likes to imagine them. They are moments of unbearable loss, of love expressed through abandonment, because no other option exists. By the second day, the ghetto is almost empty. The population that once numbered in the tens of thousands has been reduced to scattered pockets of the living, hiding in ruins and earth. German units conduct final sweeps, killing anyone they find. Bodies are piled and burned. Evidence is destroyed. The killing does not stop when resistance ceases. It stops only when there is no one left to kill. Those who survive underground listen as the sounds of destruction fade, replaced by a new silence, one heavier than before. This silence is not anticipation. It is aftermath. When survivors finally emerge days later, the Minsk Ghetto no longer exists. There are no streets as they remember them, no courtyards, no familiar buildings. The place where an entire community lived, suffered, resisted, and died has been reduced to scorched ground and broken walls. The liquidation is complete, but extermination has not succeeded as intended. Because some lived, because some escaped, because beneath the rubble, the story did not end. The Germans believe they have erased Minsk's Jews. They will soon discover that erasure is not the same as annihilation. Those who survive carry memory with them, and memory, once carried beyond the reach of bullets and fire, becomes something even the most brutal system cannot destroy. The ghetto is gone, but its people are not finished yet. Chapter 11: Survival After Erasure. When the gunfire finally stops, it does not bring relief. It brings disbelief. A silence so vast it feels unnatural settles over the ruins where the Minsk Ghetto once stood, broken only by the crackle of dying fires and the occasional collapse of a weakened wall. The city above resumes its rhythm cautiously, but in this place, time has fractured. What was once crowded with life is now an expanse of ash, rubble, and the unburied dead. Those who remain alive do not step into the open immediately. They cannot afford to believe the killing is finished. Days pass underground as survivors lie motionless in malinas filled with stale air and the smell of fear that is soaked into the earth itself. Hunger gnaws relentlessly, but hunger is familiar. Discovery is not survivable. When people finally emerge, it is done in stages. One person lifts a board and peers out. Another listens for footsteps. A third climbs into daylight and freezes, stunned by what they see. Streets no longer exist as they remember them. Familiar buildings are gutted shells. Entire blocks are gone. The ghetto has not been emptied. It has been erased. The survivors move like ghosts, stepping carefully over debris and bodies that have begun to decay in the open air. The smell is overpowering, a sickly mix of smoke, rot, and burned flesh. Flies swarm in thick clouds. Shoes crunch on glass and bone fragments alike. No one cries. Tears require energy few can spare. Some survivors search instinctively for loved ones, even knowing the futility. They call names softly, afraid to raise their voices. They peer into collapsed buildings, into courtyards filled with ash, into pits where earth has been disturbed again and again. Every discovery wounds anew. Most searches end in silence. German patrols still move through the ruins, checking for movement, for life that escaped the initial destruction. Those found are shot without ceremony. Survival now depends on invisibility beyond what the ghetto once demanded. People move at night, hide during the day, sleep in places no one would think to look. Inside collapsed walls, beneath piles of refuse, in sewer tunnels that lead nowhere but darkness. Food becomes the immediate crisis. With the ghetto destroyed, organized smuggling and rationing vanish. Survivors scavenge desperately, searching ruins for anything edible. Burned grain, moldy bread, potato peels frozen into the ground. People eat things they would never have considered food before. The body demands fuel, no matter the cost. Water is scarce and often contaminated. Survivors drink from puddles, melted snow, broken pipes. Illness spreads quickly among those already weakened. But there is no longer a community to fall sick together. Illness now isolates completely. Those who cannot move are left behind. There is no cruelty in this, only necessity. Some survivors attempt to blend into the city outside the former ghetto. They strip off identifying markers, burn documents, change names. Passing as non-Jewish becomes a matter of posture, speech, accent. Every interaction is a risk. A glance held too long. A question asked casually. A neighbor who suspects and reports. Death now comes from a whisper rather than a gunshot. Others make their way to the forests, following routes memorized during resistance planning. They travel alone or in pairs, avoiding roads, sleeping under trees, moving only when darkness offers cover. The forests are not safe, but they offer possibility. Soviet partisan units operate there, wary but receptive. For those who reach them, survival transforms into struggle. Joining the partisans does not mean safety. It means hunger of a different kind. Cold, constant movement, combat, but also means agency. Those who fight do so knowing exactly why. They sabotage rail lines. They ambush patrols. They gather intelligence. Every act is fueled by memory of what was lost. For those who remain in the city, survival requires a different kind of resistance. It means erasing one's past while refusing to forget it internally. Survivors take menial jobs. They sweep streets. They clean offices. They disappear into anonymity. Inside, they carry entire worlds that no longer exist. Children who survive adapt with a terrifying efficiency. They learn new names quickly. They mimic accents. They lie without hesitation. Their eyes hold knowledge far older than their years. Childhood does not return. It has been burned away with the ghetto. The Germans begin efforts to destroy evidence. Bodies are exhumed and burned. Mass graves are concealed. Buildings are demolished further to remove traces of what stood there before. The intent is clear. Not just to kill, but to erase memory itself. But memory survives in people. Survivors write when they can. On scraps of paper. On walls. In their minds. They record names, dates, places, knowing that the act of remembering is itself an act of defiance. Some bury these records, hoping they will be found. Others carry them until death. As months pass, the absence of the ghetto becomes a presence of its own. The space where it stood feels wrong, hollow, as if the city itself knows something vital has been torn out. Locals avoid the area when they can. Some are haunted by what they saw. Others refuse to acknowledge it at all. The war continues beyond Minsk. News filters in slowly. The front shifts. German losses mount. For survivors, these developments are distant echoes. Victory or defeat does not restore the dead, but it offers something else, the possibility that their story might one day be told without fear. Liberation, when it comes, does not arrive as salvation. It arrives as confirmation. Confirmation that what happened was real, that the horror was not imagined, that survival was not a mistake. Those who live to see it stand in a city that barely resembles the one they lost. They search for other survivors, calling names into rooms that echo emptily. Reunions are rare and fragile. Most meetings confirm loss rather than heal it. The Minsk Ghetto exists now only in fragments, photographs, testimonies, memories carried by those who escaped death by inches. Its destruction was meant to be total. Its people were meant to vanish without leaving a trace. But survival itself becomes the trace. Those who live carry forward not just their own lives, but the weight of thousands who could not. Every breath taken after erasure is an act of remembrance. Every story told defies the silence the killers intended. The ghetto is gone. Its streets erased. Its buildings burned. But beneath the surface of history, beneath official reports and reconstructed facades, the truth remains. A city lived. A city suffered. A city resisted. And even after it was wiped from a map, its people continued to live, carrying Minsk with them into a world that would one day be forced to remember what happened here. Because erasure is never complete. As long as someone survives to speak, the dead are not entirely silent. And the story of the Minsk Ghetto does not end in fire. It endures in memory, in testimony, and in the quiet defiance of survival itself. Chapter 12. Memory Beneath the Ruins. Years pass, but the ground where the Minsk Ghetto once stood never fully settles. Even when new buildings rise and streets are renamed, something beneath the surface resists forgetting. Survivors feel it when they return, when their feet touch the soil that once hid them, fed them air through cracks, pressed down on their chests while they waited for death to move on. The city looks ordinary again. The earth remembers otherwise. When the war ends and Soviet forces reclaim Minsk, liberation does not arrive as a clean break between horror and relief. It arrives as shock layered atop exhaustion. Soldiers walk through streets where entire neighborhoods are missing, where burned foundations outline lives that no longer exist. Mass graves are uncovered slowly, reluctantly, as if the city itself hesitates to reveal how much it has swallowed. For the survivors, liberation is disorienting. They are free to move, but unsure where to go. They are alive, but surrounded by absence. Families search for one another in hospitals, camps, villages, forests. Lists are posted. Names are called. Silence answers most of them. Reunions are rare and almost unbearable in their intensity. More often, recognition comes in the form of confirmation of death. Those who survived underground emerge carrying habits shaped by darkness. They flinch at sudden sounds. They sleep lightly, waking at imagined footsteps. Some cannot tolerate closed spaces. Others cannot bear open ones. The body has learned lessons the mind cannot unlearn. The Soviet state moves quickly to restore order, to rebuild, to move forward. The war narrative emphasizes victory, sacrifice, unity. There is little room for the specificity of Jewish suffering. The Minsk Ghetto is acknowledged, but not fully named for what it was. Mass murder becomes subsumed under broader categories of wartime loss. For many survivors, this is a second erasure. Official memorials are sparse and generalized. The word Jew is often absent. The underground city, the malinas, the resistance networks, these details live mostly in memory, in testimony passed quietly between those who were there. Survivors learn that speaking too loudly about what happened can invite suspicion or dismissal. Silence, once enforced by terror, now becomes a strategy for survival again. Yet memory refuses to stay buried. Survivors write diaries from recollection, filling in gaps left by trauma. They speak to one another late at night, recounting details no official record includes: the smell of damp earth, the sound of breath held during action, and the weight of bodies pressed together in darkness. These stories circulate privately at first, then slowly reach historians, writers, and future generations. Some survivors leave Minsk entirely. They emigrate when they can, carrying the ghetto with them across borders and oceans. In new countries, they build families, careers, communities. They tell stories cautiously, often only when asked directly, often only when age loosens the grip of fear. Children and grandchildren inherit fragments, images, silences that shape their understanding of the world. Others remain. They walk past the places where the ghetto once stood, where friends were shot, where tunnels ran beneath their feet. They live ordinary lives in extraordinary proximity to unmarked graves. The city rebuilds itself around them, but they notice where the pavement dips slightly, where the ground seems softer. They know what lies beneath. Over time, researchers begin piecing together the scope of what happened. Documents surface. Testimonies are collected. The scale of survival through underground hiding becomes clearer. The Minsk Ghetto emerges as something unique, a place where thousands lived beneath Nazi control for months, even years, creating an invisible city under a visible one. This story complicates the narrative of victimhood with one of ingenuity, cooperation, and defiance. The malinas are remembered not just as hiding places, but as proof of human adaptability under extreme conditions. They were built without blueprints, without resources, under constant threat. They required trust in a world designed to destroy trust. They demanded silence from children and courage from the weak. They turned the earth itself into an ally. Commemorations evolve slowly. Markers appear. Plaques are installed. Some are accurate. Others are vague. Survivors attend ceremonies where speeches feel distant from lived reality. Still they go. Presence itself becomes testimony. As decades pass, the number of living witnesses shrinks. Memory shifts from lived experience to recorded history. The risk of distortion grows. Simplification creeps in. Stories are compressed into lessons, timelines, statistics. Something essential threatens to slip away. The texture of survival, the daily decisions made under impossible pressure, the moral ambiguity of living when others did not. This is why the underground matters. Not just as a historical fact, but as a lens through which to understand what survival meant in Minsk. It was not heroic in the conventional sense. It was not always noble. It was messy, fearful, sometimes desperate. People argued underground. They made mistakes. They panicked. They survived anyway. The legacy of the Minsk Ghetto is not only in death counts or dates. It is in the choices people made when every option was wrong. It is in the parents who sealed trapdoors behind their children, in the builders who calculated how much earth could be removed without collapsing a ceiling, in the couriers who ran through streets knowing they might not return, in the silence held by hundreds of people breathing together beneath the city. Memory also lives in the city's geography. Streets carry new names, but the old ones linger in testimony. Buildings stand where others were burned, but their foundations rest on layered histories. The city grows upward, but its past remains downward, pressed into soil and story. For historians, the Minsk Ghetto challenges assumptions. It complicates narratives of passivity and resistance. It forces acknowledgement that survival took many forms, that hiding could be as radical as fighting, that resistance did not always announce itself with weapons. Sometimes it announced itself with a shovel, a whisper, a sealed door. For descendants, the legacy is deeply personal. They inherit resilience alongside grief. They carry questions with no answers. They feel responsibility to remember, to speak, to ensure that the underground city does not disappear a second time through neglect or denial. As the 20th century closes and the 21st begins, the urgency of memory intensifies. Survivors speak more openly, aware that time is running out. Testimonies are recorded. Museums collect artifacts. Scholars document malina locations, resistance networks, survivor accounts. Each act pushes back against the erasure the Nazis intended. The Minsk Ghetto becomes part of a larger understanding of the Holocaust, not as a monolith, but as a constellation of experiences shaped by place, timing, and human response. Its story stands alongside others, distinct yet connected, reminding us that genocide is not only about killing, but about attempting to destroy the possibility of future memory. The underground city beneath Nazi control did something extraordinary. It preserved life long enough for memory to escape. It allowed witnesses to survive. It ensured that when the ruins were cleared and the streets rebuilt, something essential remained intact. What remains now is responsibility. Responsibility to tell the story without simplifying it, to honor survival without romanticizing it, to acknowledge courage without ignoring fear, to remember the dead without erasing the complexity of the living. The ground beneath Minsk still holds secrets. Some tunnels were never found. Some names were never recorded. Some stories were never told aloud. But enough remains to ensure that the ghetto cannot vanish completely. Because memory, like the people who once hid beneath the city, finds ways to endure. And as long as the story is told, fully, honestly, without turning away, the underground city beneath Nazi control continues to exist. Not in earth and timber, but in remembrance. Chapter 13. What the world almost lost. The danger does not end when the killing stops. It changes shape. It becomes quieter, more subtle, harder to confront. After the ruins cool and the gunfire fades, a new threat emerges. The possibility that what happened here might be misunderstood, minimized, folded into abstraction, or lost entirely beneath statistics and dates. For the survivors of the Minsk Ghetto, this danger feels almost as real as the one they escaped underground. In the years after the war, the world struggles to comprehend what it has uncovered. Numbers dominate the conversation. Millions dead, thousands of ghettos, hundreds of camps. The scale is so vast that individual places risk being flattened into categories. Minsk becomes a dot on a map, a footnote in a tragedy too large to hold in one mind. The underground city, its tunnels, its whispered rules, its breath-held silences, does not fit neatly into summaries. Survivors sense this immediately. When they speak, they are often met with disbelief, confusion, or impatience. How could people live underground for months? How could children remain silent through mass executions above them? How could a city exist beneath a city? These questions are asked not with cruelty, but with the quiet skepticism of those whose lives have never required such adaptations. Many survivors stop trying to explain. Language feels inadequate. Words like fear, hunger, and hiding have meanings too small for what they experienced. How do you describe the sound of soil settling inches above your face while gunfire echoes overhead? How do you explain what it feels like to teach a child to breathe shallowly so they will not be heard? How do you convey the moment when silence becomes more terrifying than noise? The Soviet narrative of the war leaves little room for such specificity. Heroism is defined in military terms. Suffering is framed as collective and universal. Jewish identity is often erased from official accounts, replaced with broader language about civilians and victims of fascism. The Minsk Ghetto is acknowledged, but its uniqueness is muted. The underground city is rarely mentioned at all. This omission is not accidental. It reflects a discomfort with stories that complicate clean narratives of resistance and victory. The malinas were not battlefields. They were spaces of endurance. Their builders were not soldiers in uniform, but civilians forced into extraordinary acts of engineering and restraint. Their resistance was quiet, improvised, and morally complex. These are harder stories to celebrate, but no less important. As time passes, physical traces vanish. Rubble is cleared. New buildings rise. Streets are paved. The places where trapdoors once opened are sealed beneath concrete. Without testimony, there would be nothing to mark where people hid, where entire families breathed together in darkness while the world above burned. What almost disappears is not just evidence, but understanding. Understanding that survival itself was an achievement shaped by cooperation, trust, and constant risk. Understanding that resistance did not always look like uprising, but often looked like preparation, digging carefully, reinforcing beams, planning ventilation, sharing food in spaces where one cough could mean death. Understanding that the line between life and death was often measured in centimeters of earth and seconds of silence. Historians who eventually uncover the story of the Minsk Ghetto's underground city are struck by its scale. Thousands survived by hiding. Not one or two isolated cases, but entire networks of malinas connected across neighborhoods. This was not coincidence. It was collective ingenuity under extermination pressure. Yet even this realization comes slowly. Survivor testimonies are scattered across languages, countries, decades. Many are recorded late in life. Voices trembling not from age alone, but from the weight of memories carried too long without listeners. Each testimony fills in a piece of a mosaic that might easily have remained incomplete. What the world almost loses is the knowledge that genocide is not only a story of death, but also of adaptation under impossible conditions. That victims were not passive objects of violence, but thinking, planning, responding human beings whose choices mattered, even when outcomes were overwhelmingly grim. Children who survived underground grow up carrying this knowledge in their bodies. They remember darkness more vividly than daylight. Some cannot tolerate silence. Others seek it obsessively. Their relationships with safety, authority, and trust are permanently altered. These effects ripple outward, shaping families and communities long after the war ends. Descendants inherit questions they cannot answer fully. Why did my grandmother never speak of certain years? Why does my father avoid basements? Why does the smell of damp earth provoke panic? These are not historical curiosities. They are living consequences of what happened beneath Minsk. The underground city challenges how the Holocaust is remembered. It resists simplification. It insists on nuance. It demands acknowledgement that survival required constant negotiation with fear, compromise, and chance. It forces recognition that heroism is not always loud, and that endurance can be as radical as revolt. What the world almost loses is also a warning. The malinas existed because ordinary structures failed, because neighbors could not always be trusted, because institutions meant to protect life were repurposed to destroy it, because people were forced to choose between visibility and survival. These conditions are not confined to one place or time. They are patterns that repeat when hatred is bureaucratized and violence normalized. Remembering Minsk in full means remembering not only how people died, but how they lived while death surrounded them. It means honoring the intelligence required to survive as much as the courage required to resist openly. It means acknowledging that under certain conditions, the most radical act is simply to remain alive. As survivors age and pass away, the responsibility of memory shifts entirely. No longer carried in living voices, it moves into archives, recordings, books, and documentaries. This transition is dangerous. Without care, stories harden into symbols and lose their texture. The underground becomes a metaphor rather than a place where people scraped knuckles raw against dirt to widen a tunnel another inch. To remember correctly is to resist this flattening. It is to insist on detail, on discomfort, on stories that do not resolve neatly. The Minsk Ghetto does not offer easy lessons. It offers complexity, contradiction, and human behavior under absolute pressure. It asks difficult questions. What would you trade for silence if silence meant survival? How long could you live without light? Who would you trust when trust itself could kill you? These are not theoretical exercises. They were daily realities. The world almost loses the understanding that survival was communal. No one lived underground alone for long. Malinas required cooperation. Silence required discipline. Food required sharing. Betrayal meant annihilation. The underground city was built not just from wood and earth, but from fragile agreements maintained under terror. And yet, those agreements held long enough to matter. They held long enough for witnesses to survive. They held long enough for memory to escape. They held long enough for history to be written not only by perpetrators and liberators, but by those who hid beneath a city that tried to bury them alive. The Minsk Ghetto was meant to vanish without leaving a trace. Its underground city was meant to suffocate in darkness, unseen and unacknowledged. That it did not is not an accident. It is the result of human refusal, quiet, persistent, and shared. What the world almost lost is the proof that even under total domination, people adapt in ways that preserve not just life, but meaning. That memory can survive even when space is destroyed. That the earth itself can become an archive if people live long enough to tell what it hid. To remember Minsk fully is to look downward as well as outward. To understand that history does not only unfold on battlefields and in official documents, but also beneath kitchens, courtyards, and streets, where people waited in silence for the chance to live another day. The underground city no longer exists physically, but its lessons remain fragile. They require attention. They require telling. Because what was almost lost can still be lost again, not to fire or bullets, but to forgetting. And forgetting, in the end, is what the killers wanted most. Chapter 14, Justice, Silence, and a Long Aftermath. Justice arrives late, unevenly, and never in the form survivors imagined while hiding beneath the streets of Minsk. It does not descend with clarity or restore balance. It drifts in fragments, trials held far away, names printed in newspapers, sentences that feel abstract compared to the enormity of what was done. For those who survive the ghetto and its underground city, justice is not a moment. It is a question that lingers for the rest of their lives. In the immediate aftermath of liberation, there is little time for reckoning. The Soviet Union is focused on rebuilding, consolidating power, restoring order. The city of Minsk is a wound that must be covered quickly. Streets are cleared. Housing is rebuilt. Factories reopen. Life is pushed forward by necessity and ideology alike. The ruins where the ghetto stood are treated as spaces to be repurposed, not preserved. Survivors return to a city that feels both familiar and hostile. Their homes are gone or occupied by strangers. Their possessions have vanished into the machinery of war and theft. Their families exist now only in memory. They file claims, ask questions, seek recognition. Often, they are met with bureaucracy, suspicion, or indifference. Survival itself becomes something that must be justified. Trials of German perpetrators occur, but many of those most directly responsible never stand before a court. Some flee. Some reintegrate quietly into post-war society elsewhere. Some are absorbed into new conflicts, new hierarchies. The scale of the Holocaust overwhelms the capacity of justice systems to respond meaningfully. Accountability becomes selective by necessity, incomplete by design. For survivors of the Minsk Ghetto, this incompleteness is deeply personal. They remember faces, voices, habits. They remember which officers ordered shootings, which guards laughed, which informants betrayed neighbors. These memories do not align neatly with indictments or verdicts. Justice, when it comes, feels distant from lived experience. The Soviet approach to war crimes emphasizes collective suffering and victory over fascism. Jewish identity is subsumed into a broader narrative of civilian loss. The specificity of anti-Jewish extermination is often muted. Survivors learn quickly which words are safe to use and which draw uncomfortable attention. Silence becomes, once again, a survival skill. This enforced quiet has consequences. Trauma unspoken does not disappear. It settles into the body. Survivors experience nightmares, sudden panic, difficulty trusting even in peacetime. Some cannot sleep without light. Others cannot tolerate basements or enclosed spaces. These reactions are rarely recognized as wounds. They are treated as personal quirks, weaknesses, or simply ignored. Families formed after the war grow around absences. Children sense what cannot be said. They learn where questions end conversations. They inherit anxiety without understanding its origin. The underground city becomes a ghost passed down through behavior rather than story. Those who attempt to speak openly often find few listeners. In the immediate post-war years, the world is saturated with horror. There are too many stories, too many numbers, too much pain. Attention shifts quickly to reconstruction, to new political tensions, to the future. Survivors of Minsk feel their experiences slipping into obscurity, overshadowed by larger, more visible narratives. Yet some persist. They write letters. They give testimony. They speak to historians when asked. Each retelling extracts a cost, reopening wounds sealed by time and necessity. But there is also a sense of obligation. If I do not speak, who will? If they remain silent, the underground city risks disappearing entirely. As decades pass, a slow change begins. Scholars turn their attention to overlooked ghettos, to localized experiences that complicate monolithic narratives. The Minsk Ghetto emerges not only as a site of mass murder, but as a place of extraordinary survival through underground hiding and resistance. The malinas become subjects of study rather than whispered memory. This renewed attention brings mixed emotions. Validation arrives alongside grief. Survivors are asked to recall details they spent years trying to forget. They are asked to explain how people lived underground, how children remained silent, how tunnels were built. The questions are respectful, but the answers are heavy. Justice, in this later sense, is not punitive. It is archival. It exists in recognition rather than retribution. For some survivors, this is enough. To know that the story will not vanish. To see it written, taught, remembered. For others, it feels inadequate. No amount of acknowledgement can balance the loss. Memorials are eventually established. Plaques mark the ghetto's boundaries. Ceremonies are held. Words like Jewish victims appear more frequently, though not always prominently. The underground city remains harder to commemorate. How do you mark spaces that no longer exist? How do you memorialize absence beneath concrete? Some survivors return for these ceremonies. They stand in crowds, listening to speeches, looking at faces too young to remember. They feel pride and distance at once. The city has moved on. It must. But they remain tethered to a version of Minsk that exists only in memory and soil. Justice also confronts survivors with uncomfortable truths about collaboration and betrayal. Not all perpetrators wore German uniforms. Some were neighbors, co-workers, acquaintances. The war fractured moral boundaries in ways that do not heal easily. Post-war society often prefers not to examine these fractures too closely. This silence protects some and isolates others. Survivors who remember betrayals learn that speaking of them can reopen old wounds, provoke denial, or invite hostility. Once again, restraint feels safer than truth. And yet, the underground city continues to exert a quiet pull on historical consciousness. It resists simplification. It challenges assumptions about passivity and agency. It complicates the idea of justice itself. How do you measure justice for people who survive by living underground, unseen, unacknowledged for months at a time? How do you account for lives saved through silence rather than action? Justice, in the end, becomes something survivors construct internally. It lives in teaching their children resilience, in telling stories when they can, in insisting, sometimes gently and sometimes fiercely, that what happened in Minsk matters. The long aftermath also includes a transformation of memory into responsibility. As survivors age, they become acutely aware that they are the last direct witnesses. The burden of memory grows heavier with each passing year. Some begin speaking more openly, urgency replacing caution. They record testimonies, visit schools, meet historians. They want the underground city to outlive them. This urgency collides with the reality of fading attention. New crises emerge. New atrocities demand focus. The past competes constantly with the present. Remembering becomes an act of resistance against distraction as much as denial. Justice, then, is not a destination reached once and for all. It is a process, fragile and ongoing, dependent on memory, scholarship, and moral choice. It requires effort from those who did not suffer directly, who must decide whether to listen, to learn, to care. The Minsk Ghetto's underground city asks a final, difficult question of the future. Not whether the perpetrators were punished enough, not whether monuments are sufficient, but whether the complexity of survival will be honored alongside the reality of destruction. Because justice that forgets how people lived is incomplete. Justice that counts only the dead risks erasing the courage of the living. The long aftermath of Minsk is not just about what was done there, but about how it is carried forward, through silence, through speech, through remembrance shaped by honesty rather than comfort. The ghetto was erased. The underground city collapsed. But the moral terrain they created remains. And navigating it requires more than verdicts or ceremonies. It requires the willingness to sit with discomfort, to accept that justice, like survival, is often imperfect, and to remember not only that people were killed here, but that people lived here beneath the ground long enough to leave a story behind. That story now belongs to the world. Whether the world does justice to it remains an open question. Chapter 15, Beneath the City Beyond Time. Long after the last shot is fired, long after the last fire burns itself out, the story of the Minsk Ghetto refuses to end where history would prefer to leave it. There's a temptation, especially in the aftermath of catastrophe, to draw a clean line, to say this is where suffering stopped, this is where memory belongs, sealed in archives and ceremonies. But Minsk does not allow that. Minsk lingers. It breathes beneath the present, pressing upward through time, refusing to stay buried. The underground city no longer exists in wood and earth. The malinas have collapsed, been filled in, paved over, forgotten by those who walk above them unaware. And yet, they persist in another form, carried by survivors, by descendants, by historians who listen closely enough to hear what the ground once held. The city beneath Nazi control becomes something larger than a place. It becomes a question passed forward. What does survival mean when survival itself requires disappearance? What does resistance look like when the only victory is another day alive? These questions do not belong only to the past. They reach forward, unsettling and unresolved. For those who live beneath Minsk, time fractures permanently. There is before the ghetto, the descent into darkness, and everything that follows. Ordinary life never fully returns. Even joy carries weight. Even safety feels conditional. Survivors often describe feeling as though they are standing on a thin layer of ground, aware that collapse is always possible. This awareness does not fade with age. It sharpens. Many survivors rarely speak of the underground directly. Instead, it emerges sideways, in habits and silences, in instincts passed down unknowingly. Children grow up, learning to be quiet without being told why. Families store food obsessively. Doors are checked repeatedly. Basements are avoided or feared. These are not quirks. They are echoes. And yet, alongside fear, something else endures. Ingenuity, adaptability, the ability to cooperate under pressure. Survivors often build lives defined by persistence rather than ambition, by meaning rather than accumulation. They understand, at a level few others do, how fragile normality truly is. For descendants, the underground city becomes both inheritance and responsibility. They grow up sensing that something immense preceded them, something unnamed but ever-present. When they finally learn the details, about malinas, about held breath, about darkness inches away from discovery, the knowledge reshapes identity. It answers questions that never had words before. The Minsk Ghetto teaches that genocide is not only an act of killing, but an attempt to erase the conditions that allow memory to survive. The Nazis sought not just to destroy bodies, but to eliminate the possibility of witnesses. The underground city shattered that goal. It allowed memory to escape containment. This is why the story matters now, perhaps more than ever, because the mechanisms that enabled Minsk, the bureaucratic language, the gradual restrictions, the normalization of violence, the isolation of a targeted population, are not relics. They are patterns. They reappear whenever humanity convinces itself that some lives matter less than others. The malinas remind us that people do not simply submit to annihilation. They adapt. They improvise. They resist in ways that may not look heroic from a distance, but are heroic in their refusal to vanish. They remind us that resistance does not always roar. Sometimes it breathes shallowly in the dark. This challenges how history is often told. We are comfortable with clear roles, heroes and villains, fighters and victims. Minsk complicates this. It shows us people who are all of these things at once. People who hid rather than fought openly. People who complied outwardly while sabotaging quietly. People who survived not by triumph, but by endurance. To honor this story fully requires rejecting simplification. It requires sitting with discomfort, with the knowledge that survival sometimes demanded impossible choices, moral ambiguity, silence where speech felt like betrayal. It requires acknowledging that courage is not always loud, and that fear does not negate bravery. As time moves forward, the risk is not denial alone, but dilution. Stories shortened, details softened, Suffering turned into metaphor rather than lived experience. The underground city becomes a symbol rather than a place where children learn not to cry and adults learn to count breaths instead of hours. This documentary exists to resist that dilution, to insist that the Minsk Ghetto was not only a site of death, but a site of extraordinary human adaptation. That beneath one of the most brutal systems ever imposed, people built a second city, hidden, fragile, temporary, but real. A city made of trust and fear, earth and wood, silence and shared will. There are no monuments large enough to capture this fully. No single narrative can contain it. But telling the story, in detail and without turning away, is itself an act of preservation. It keeps the underground from collapsing a second time, this time into forgetfulness. The city of Minsk today stands rebuilt, vibrant, moving forward as all cities must. People walk streets unaware that beneath their feet once lay tunnels where lives were held together by whispers. This unawareness is not a failure. It is the cost of survival at scale. Cities cannot carry every memory openly, but people can. And so the responsibility shifts from ground to voice, from place to listener. To remember Minsk is not to freeze it in tragedy. It is to recognize what happened there as part of a continuum of human behavior, capable of destruction beyond measure, but also capable of ingenuity under terror. It is to understand that the underground city was not an anomaly born of unique circumstances, but a response to conditions that can arise again. The final truth of the Minsk Ghetto is not found only in how many were killed, but in how many refused to disappear quietly. And how many chose cooperation over isolation, planning over panic, memory over erasure? And how many understood that even if they did not live to see freedom, surviving long enough to be remembered was itself a form of victory? Beneath the city, people waited. Beyond the city, memory traveled. And now, far removed in time, but not in meaning, the story reaches us. What we do with it, how carefully we hold it, how honestly we tell it, how fiercely we defend its complexity, will determine whether the underground city beneath Nazi control truly remains a part of human history, or whether it fades once more into silence. The people of Minsk hid beneath the earth so the story could rise. It has risen. What happens next is no longer up to them. It is up to us.